Thank you very much. Okay, next item is a review of the agenda by the board. Any additions or changes or corrections you feel like you need to the consent agenda? If not, or the agenda. If not, can I hear a motion?
Motion to approve the agenda.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
No
Aye.
opposing. All right, the next item is the consent agenda, and there's 4 items listed there. 2 of them calls for a public hearing. One is annexation petition, and then the last one is the Americans with Disability Act, ADA. I think we had a workshop and talked about that last time. So I entertain a motion or discussion on the consent agenda.
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Okay, I got a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, got a motion and a second. Any more discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? I didn't hear any, so thank you very much. All right, now we get into the items of business here. The first item we got is a public hearing. This is a legislative type of public hearing. It's case UDO TA 20-30, Article 10, has to do with adding senior housing parking standards. So I will open the public hearing and call on staff to, Julie, call on you to give us a presentation.
Great, thank you, Mayor. Good evening, and good evening to the commissioners. I hope you're all well tonight. And tonight we are talking about the UDO TA 20-03 for a text amendment for an amendment to the parking and loading requirements. And I'm going to hopefully advance this, yes. So it is for Article 10, Section 10.1, Senior Housing Parking Standards. And this is a request by Taft Mills Group to amend the required number of off-street parking spaces for multifamily senior housing. And in your packet, you'll notice that Transportation Consultants Ramey Camp Associates has reviewed the applicant's request, stating the request is consistent with industry findings and parking rates. The current use table in Section 10.110 does not differentiate between multifamily uses. So we just have one line item in the table that says multifamily. And then I'll show you in a minute in another slide what that requirement is. So staff is proposing a definition of senior housing to be added to Article 16 of the definitions. And this is what we currently have in Section 10.1.10. for the parking standards. The dwellings, multifamily, where it says 2 spaces for each dwelling unit plus 1/2 per bedroom over 2 bedrooms plus 1 visitor space for each 4 dwelling units. That is what is currently in our ordinance. So that doesn't differentiate between the types of multifamily dwellings. So what we're proposing is, as you see the bolded and underlined writing, of doing a excluding senior housing addition to the multifamily dwellings that's already in the requirements and not changing the requirements for regular multifamily, and then adding a new line for multifamily senior housing, and that is 1 space per dwelling unit. And the reason for this, as you see in your packet, is that they've done some parking studies in the surrounding area, Wake Forest, here in Rolesville, of what we're actually using for our parking. And right now, we're using less than 1 per dwelling unit. And so having the 2 spaces for each dwelling unit, plus a 1/2 per bedroom over 2 bedrooms, plus a visitor space for each 4 dwelling units, is a little bit overuse of the parking. And so we're requiring more impervious surface than the town really needs to be adding, because we're not using those parking amenities. So we could be using that space for something else. So we've added that line for dwellings, multifamily, senior housing to reduce that parking standard to 1 space per dwelling unit.
And you're reducing it from what?
From the line above it where it says dwellings multifamily excluding senior housing, we're reducing it from 2 spaces for each dwelling unit plus 1/2 per bedroom over 2 bedrooms. So if they have a 3-bedroom dwelling unit for the multifamily dwelling, they're going to have another 1/2 parking space. So as you have more dwelling units in that senior family housing development that have over 3 bedrooms, you're going to be requiring more and more parking.
I don't know of any senior housing developer that puts in over 2 bedrooms.
Well, this is what our current requirement is.
Okay.
So that is what is currently on the books.
Okay.
So what we're doing is, for senior housing, reducing that because we do think that's a little bit too much.
I thought this came up when we did the senior housing last time.
Yeah,
There was too much
if-
parking for the senior housing, and we did something then, but you say there's nothing at all in there?
I don't believe that went through. Now, that was a little bit before my time, and we can ask Danny
We
for
didn't
some
pass it,
history. But I don't think it went through, and I think what did go through was reduction of parking stall widths. So I think it reduced the stall parking, but not necessarily how many spaces of parking. And so what this is this is going to reduce the number of spaces required for that development.
Okay. When we built the Grand, I thought we were held to 2 parking spaces per unit.
And you might have been.
And I could be wrong. I'd like to know that. I have a problem with this because of holidays. And one person or 2 people in a unit, and you're giving them 1 parking space. And Easter and Christmas, they have grandchildren and children coming, you run out of spaces. I'm okay with 2 instead of 2.5, but I do have a problem with 1.
I have the question of where are they supposed to park if they have an additional car? If there are 2, it's a household of 2, where is the additional parking if they have?
So these are minimum parking requirements, so the developer can always add more, and there are visitor spaces that we do have in addition to this. When you have the multifamily parking requirements, we still do have some overflow parking, and we do still have visitor parking. But what this is it's a minimum that they have to do at least 1 space per dwelling unit rather than the 2. But if you would like to see something different, we can work with that.
No, what we have at the Grand is working well. I would like to know what that is. And before I feel comfortable to make a decision on that. But again, I'm only one voice of 5.
Yeah, I mean, back up a minute.
Are you finished presenting? I was
No,
just-
there's still a couple more slides,
sorry.
but
I
this
just
is
wanted to
good.
hear her out first.
No,
Maybe she's
this is
not-
good discussion, so it's fine.
Maybe you're gonna answer some of our questions though, so.
Well, I may. Part of what the Ramey Camp letter did, and I'm looking to see if the Grand was included in that parking study, and I don't believe it was. The same analysis was performed at the Grand at Granite Falls, an age-restricted multifamily development in Rolesville, on February 17th on President's Day at 1:22 p.m. 47 spaces were occupied. There are 74 units in the development. So 0.5875 spaces were occupied for every unit. Now, President's Day is not a big holiday, so it's not like Christmas and Easter like you're talking about. But that was what they discovered on a day that is a holiday. There were still less than 1 parking space per unit being used. In fact, it was closer to half a parking space per unit being used. And that letter from Ramey Camp is included in your packet. And so that was number 4 in the analysis that Ramey Camp provided of the different projects around town, around Rolesville and Wake Forest, and what the median parking was. And they found that the highest utilization for a parking space was 0.6905 spaces per unit. So even on the highest parking requirements and usage of that parking lot at the day they did these studies, they were still using less than one space per dwelling unit. But that again, doesn't take into consideration some of the holidays that you're concerned with. So, for the next slide, this is just as part of the definitions, since we're adding look back up one slide, since we're adding senior housing as a qualifier for the multifamily dwellings, we need to add a definition to the definitions section of the UDO as well. And so what we're proposing for the senior housing definition is age-restricted housing consistent with the Department of Housing and Urban Development guidelines for the Fair Housing Act, housing for older persons. And they have a couple different guidelines on what constitutes senior housing. And it has a couple different age limits depending on what you're doing with the development. So we are going to rely on those definitions to help make it consistent with federal guidelines and our guidelines. So that is what we've crafted the definition to say. So our definition would rely on the federal guidelines for what constitutes senior housing. So with the comprehensive plan does encourage that any time that a demand and practice that is not necessarily current for the needs of the community, that we look at and revise the ordinance to update the ordinance to make it meet those current demands and practices. So the proposed text amendment does address that condition and will serve in the public interest. The change is consistent with the comprehensive plan to allow those provisions to be revised, and this does go along with two different goals in the comprehensive plan, Goal D4 and Goal UA2. Goal D4 states that the comprehensive plan encourages updates to development standards that help alleviate the demand surface for parking lots on developers to create a stronger streetscape and walkable environment. And Goal LU2 discusses addressing multifamily housing demands, emphasizing design quality by applying elements of form-based code to ensure quality construction and design. So those tie into what we're trying to do of making the development less impervious surface. We can substitute parking spaces for more amenities. Even if it's greenway space or open space, we can have that impervious surface exchange. So staff is recommending approval of the text amendment, both sections, the section to 10.1.10 and to 16.3. And the planning board also recommended approval, saying that it was reasonable and in the public interest and consistent with the land use plan. And then in your packet, you also have the consistency statement that if you do decide to move forward with a motion tonight, if you would like to adopt this text amendment as approved, you have the consistency statement in front of you to adopt that resolution. So we can go back to the table if you would like. I don't know if I answered your questions, so if there's any additional questions, I'd be happy to discuss.
So yeah, I have several questions.
Okay.
In addition to what Jackie had. That's why I
All
wanted
right.
you to finish.
Yeah.
What's a part of a space being occupied? Explain that to me.
Okay, so a part of a space being occupied is basically like when you do the 1/2 space per, what it does is you look at the comprehensive units for the whole development. So if you in a development for multifamily dwellings, you can have a 1-bedroom apartment, you can have a 2-bedroom apartment, you can have a 3 and a 4-bedroom apartment. So anytime that it says for the 1/2 per bedroom over 2 bedrooms, the 1/2s will be added together and then rounded up in the end to get to that nearest whole space. So if you have 1 and 2 bedroom apartments, they're just going to require the 2 spaces. But if you have 3 bedrooms or over, for those bedrooms, they're going to have each additional 1/2 space. So if you have 3 bedroom apartments and 3 4-bedroom apartments, that's 1/2 extra space for each of those. So it equals up to 3 extra spaces because those combine. So you're having some additional parking, but you're not requiring a full space to help keep those requirements a little bit lower because most times if you have a family in a multifamily dwelling apartment, the children that are having a bedroom might not have a car. And then there are some people who might have children who do have a car. So it helps give that flexibility for those who don't have the 3 vehicles and for those who do have more than 2 vehicles per family. And then as we're seeing for the senior housing, what we're seeing is that those spaces just aren't being utilized at about a half space per unit instead of the 2 spaces per unit.
Got it. So I was stuck on the half space. I got you though.
Okay,
As long as it comes out to a whole number, I can work with it.
yes.
So I saw some comparison to Charlotte. I was so lost on that.
Yeah, what they were doing is they were looking at larger areas to show that while the Rolesville doesn't have the same type of congestion that Charlotte would. So if Charlotte's a more congested area and has more condensed housing, then their parking requirements, if this is adequate for Charlotte, it should be adequate for Rolesville. So if a more condensed, larger units are, you know, with more units than we would have, if they're still only utilizing less than 1 space per unit, then that really needs to be the benchmark rather than our 2 spaces per unit, because in larger areas where there's more congestion, they're still not utilizing the 2 spaces per dwelling unit that we are requiring. So what it does is it's just showing as a population base that with more senior housing than what we might have here in Rolesville, it was just a way to compare population to population of what is really going on the ground when you're parking a car at your unit for your living space.
So when the February 17th evaluation was done, you said a time. What was the time that you said?
I believe it was 1:22 in the afternoon.
Right, it was before COVID, so that's good. But generally, I don't know. My husband's 55. I just put him on blast. But my husband's 55, so there are people who work and do things and go places during the day. So I don't know how accurate, I don't know what the right word is, how
Right.
true of a picture that is at 1:22 in the afternoon. Because if I'm traveling to work, obviously my car's not parked at my residence.
And I
And a
think
lot of
that's
55-year-olds, I think, are still working.
well, I think that's one of the reasons why they picked President's Day, because it is a bank holiday, so most people do have that day off. So they wouldn't necessarily be traveling to and from work. They might be traveling to and from to see family. They might be out doing other things. It might be, there's always President's Day sales that people are out shopping for. So they might not be in their residence at that time, but it is a holiday that's considered a bank holiday where most people have off.
And I don't really agree with that because I work for a financial institution.
And that's fine. That's fine.
And I don't
So-
think most people, that's a federal holiday, but that a lot of people are out on the roads on that day.
Okay.
And if I can add to what Sheila's saying, I've been on visitation committees at several churches, and I visit nursing homes. Of course, this was before COVID. But you don't visit a nursing home at 1:30 in the afternoon because the people eat lunch and they go to sleep. You don't visit until after 3:30 or 4 o'clock because of that. So that's not an accurate picture. And we may have 1.5 at the Grand, and that's fine because it's working over there. I just want to know what we have there. That would give me a more sense of confidence in how I vote for this.
Right, and they did study the Grand, but they didn't do it at Christmas, and they didn't do it at Easter.
That's understandable.
We kind of missed Easter this year. This report was already in play, so they did it in February. And to wait till Christmas or Thanksgiving to do the next big holiday will push this text amendment back almost to being just incorporated into the new UDO at that point. So if you're wanting to get a good picture of what happens on a major holiday, most people are traveling, and maybe they will be traveling in September for Labor Day. But if you're wanting a true family holiday to see how that's going to play into a parking study, the next major holiday really that people would gather for at this point in the year would be Thanksgiving.
And I don't want to wait that long, but I do know the people at the Grand, if there's something wrong, this body knows, they'll come complain. They've never complained about parking.
Well, I was just saying it because I would just be concerned that they have no other area to park if there is a holiday situation or somebody's, maybe I don't understand 55 and up housing. Maybe that's part of the issue, is my lack of knowledge around that. Because I'm thinking, do you not have 2 cars? Or is it just one person per unit?
I'm wondering if they're trying to take an average of all the people that live there. So they
That's
have
what they're
people
doing.
from 55 years old to 85
85.
years old.
It is an average, so it's not like you have reserved parking spaces per unit and you get these 2 spaces because that's what was tied to your unit. At least not around here. I think they do that in Raleigh for condos where your parking is a little bit more restrictive, but around here in Rolesville, we're not really experiencing that, where you have assigned parking for your community. You just pull into the nearest spot. But it's a comprehensive look at what the parking needs are. And again, when they did this study, it was drastically less than the 2 spaces that we're requiring now. 1 space per unit seemed to be enough. And I don't know if, and you have an ear on the ground, so I don't know if anybody has complained about a lack of parking over there. So again, it comes down to design standards. This is a minimum. The developer can always put in more.
Can you tell me how many visitor parking spaces are required?
I cannot off the top of my head, but I can find that information for you.
Yeah, I think that's part of the equation.
Yeah, I think that before I feel comfortable to vote, I'd like to know that answer, and I would also like to know what the standards the Grand was held to when they built theirs,
I think they was held to this one here, the multifamily.
which is
dwelling,
two
which
per
is
space.
which is 2 and plus. And the question I had, Julie, and maybe I'm reading this wrong, is the change from the existing dwelling multifamily, is a change to just one parking per unit, which is, if it's 50 units, is 50 parking places, that would, because I think what I see lacking, if we're gonna change it to 1, you still need visitor parking, because you have people that work there, you have, so I think if the board sides here, but if it makes sense to go to 1, I don't think it makes sense to eliminate all the visitor parking out of the same text change.
Or we run into a new issue, people parking on the streets.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly
That
right.
makes
That's the
sense.
underlying
That makes
concern.
sense, Julie? That makes sense.
Yes, it does.
So maybe that's one way to look at it. Maybe we don't need 2 per unit, but we may need that other stuff like the visitors or something.
I mean, and even the way I looked at it, there was 2 things I had on this. The first one was if you did like 1 unit per, or 1 parking spot per unit, and then you said, in 10 units, you an additional half space, or you have an additional 1 space that's added to that, and it kind of would work with the visitor parking as well, not just limit it to 1, but adding a little bit more into that. And the second thing I had, we received this email that talks about if we reduce the parking spaces, we'll increase the green spaces. Now, I don't read it that way. I read it as you're going to reduce the parking spaces so I can put more units in.
Less land.
That's exactly how I read it.
Less land and less development cost.
So if somebody was going to come in and say that, I would like to see what you were planning on before, and now what you're going to plan on now, and what you're going to show more
Yeah.
with your greenways and stuff. I would like to
Say
really
it.
see that.
We need to say it in the
Yeah.
text amendment too.
Right.
Yeah, I don't forget how we do green, open space is kind of what we're talking about, right?
Right.
Paul? Open space.
Yep.
I was thinking apartments require less open space than, if I recall, because they're already reducing the open space, I
Right.
think. Is that right? Do you know? That is right?
I'm not certain.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Danny's in here. Hey, Danny.
Is there any questions you wanted me to answer? I was going to, just came in case to help Julie out here a little bit so she wouldn't be hanging. This text amendment, let me just clarify a few things. On senior housing, it's pretty common that you don't have as many cars as you do for normal younger families, et cetera. The demand is not there. They don't usually have 2 cars, usually have 1 car. Some live there that don't have a car. And most senior housing needs to be close to shopping, walkability, because they depend on doing that sometimes. So all that consideration, and if we move forward with more transit options, they'll be utilizing that. You don't need all the parking spaces. The grant was put in with 2 parking spaces per unit at the time, plus the visitor parking. And you have a lot of extra spaces out there. If you go out there many times, you'll see there's not that half of it utilized. So this is really creating more pavement and more cost into those developments. Now, the question of, is it going to create more units? It could potentially when you do the logistics of spacing, but remember, this is a minimum. If they feel like they need to have more, they can do more, but this is a minimum standard. You can't go less than 1. So with senior housing, you don't have parking problems. It's very rare. Now, if you want to put as Julie's already typed in here, the 1 visitor space for each 4 dwelling units, fine. We can try that and go with it to address the question of the mayor. Talking about staff and other people.
Yeah.
What about the visitor parking?
And so what I did was, for this, and while we were talking, I went ahead and updated the PowerPoint just so you could see this. If we keep that visitor parking the same as we do for the other multi-dwelling units, it would be 1 visitor space for each 4 dwelling units, so it's consistent across all multiple family dwelling units now. And so we could add this to the text amendment. When you make a motion, if you feel comfortable making the motion, improving it tonight, you would just need to say with the changes to the amendment, amend the text amendment with the change of additional visitor parking space for the senior housing multifamily dwellings. So this is consistent with what we're already doing, so we won't be changing that. We'll keep that consistent across the board.
Okay, I have a question, because Danny just brought up a good point. You said that it would be, if it was a 50 dwelling unit, there would be 50 spaces. Well, and so the employees, no matter maintenance, front desk, and everybody would have to have some of those spaces as well, of that 50.
Right. And what we're doing right now with the 1 space per dwelling unit, again, it's shown across the studies that is still more than ample parking, because it's still being utilized, the parking lots are still being utilized as, even in the highest parking ratios we saw, as 0.7 parking spaces per unit. So we don't want to go into fractions of spaces, so it's 1 space per unit. And if you're not comfortable with that, that's fine. But if you're comfortable with that and you want to add the visitor parking, I would suggest we keep it consistent with what we're doing for the multifamily dwelling units regularly, and then just keep that consistent across the board.
I definitely think the additional visitor parking makes sense, but I want to get back to Paul's point about creating I'm reading from the language because I wrote it out, create a stronger streetscape and walkable environment. That's not being addressed. So if you put out in your UDO or you put out a text amendment in your UDO that you want, this is the minimum, I don't know too many developers or builders that go, oh, that's the minimum, we're going way above that.
Exactly
very
right.
rare. That's very rare, right? They would be out of business, right?
And then
There's a
their
reason.
attorney's gonna come in and beat us over the head by saying we are conforming.
Right, so we need to add something. If we truly mean this, what is in our comp plan, then we need to say something about that too. And I don't see that.
Well, there are a couple of different ways to address that. One would be we are doing the UDO rewrite, and we don't want to get too involved in the text amendment to make sure that when we do the UDO rewrite, we're not adding things now that need to be undone later. But we do want that consistency. So you are right. We do need that consistency across the board. But what we can do is we can look at how that plays into the form-based code that we're getting ready to move to. You know that we are currently going to that form-based code, and with that form-based code, that design and walkability is going to be addressed because we're changing the other requirements. This right now is one of the things that we're trying to get started, so other developments coming in the meantime have that basis to go on. But if that's something that you want in this, we can look at how to incorporate that.
Isn't this already here? I'm not saying add anything new. This is here already.
Let me answer
This
that
is the
question.
language that you all provide.
Let me assist with that, Commissioner Sutton. North Carolina Housing Finance and federal housing financing for senior housing has a criteria in doing loans. A lot of these facilities are going through federal or special financing through tax credits. And in that, there was guidelines for walkability, accessibility to grocery, drug stores, banks, etc., and the proximity to it. So it's rare in a urban setting that you see one located real far out in the county. You do have county facilities, and that's considered rural, but in an urban setting, it's very walkable. So I don't know if we need to go spell in the guidelines that's already covered in federal and state rules dealing with those loans. That's just my suggestion.
I'm confused. Then what is this language that you all provided us then? I got this straight out of here. This is already part of the language. That's all I'm addressing, what's there already.
No, that's recommendation, I thought.
It says comp plan, the comp plan encourages updates to develop, you read it earlier. That's already there. I'm just trying to get explanation on to create a stronger streetscape and walkable environment as goal D4.
Yes, that is part of going to the form-based code. That is
So
how.
that's not current, you're providing, this is a future
Yes, the comp plan.
aspiration?
Yes, the comp plan sets out goals of what we're trying to do and trying to achieve. So that goal is what we're trying to get to. And so as part of the UDO rewrite, we are going to a form-based code to help achieve that. And that was also one of the goals for the comp plan, was to look at our UDO and update the ordinances to make sure that we can incorporate these goals.
And I'm confused.
So the comp plan is different from the UDO because the comp plan gives you the guidelines of where you would like to be in the next 20 years for your community. And the UDO are the regulations of what development happens right now when it comes in. So we're operating under two different ordinances. So we update the ordinance to make sure that we're in line with where we want to be in the future. So when this development comes in, we have the guidelines and the provisions to get us to where that goal is. And that is our goal, is to create that walkability and that
So you're
that-
saying that is not a part of our UDO?
no, it is not current a part of the
So we're
UDO.
gonna
That's what
have-
we're working towards to achieve that goal. So goal D4 and goal LU2 is what we're working towards to achieve. And this is one of the bridges we can use to get us there.
So while you're working towards that portion of the goal, right? You're working towards, okay, we're gonna change the senior housing based on kind of some research that's been done. So if you're working towards a goal, then why isn't that part of the goal at this juncture? While you're doing that, I don't understand.
Why isn't what part of the goal? You said, why isn't
Stronger
that part?
streetscape and walkable environment.
It is part of the goal, but it's not included in this text amendment.
Why not? I guess that's my question.
Because this text amendment was to address parking. And so,
But it also overlaps because you're talking
It does
about
overlap.
less impervious surface, right? Mm-hmm. And then this being the desire, if you have less impervious surface, to go to this. Demand surface parking plus, I'm reading the words right here. Mm-hmm. So to me, it seems like it works in concert, but you're saying it doesn't?
it does work in concert, but what we're trying to do is do one text amendment to help address part of it. Because again, we're getting ready to rewrite the entire ordinance to go to a form-based code where the rest of this is going to be incorporated. So this is a bridge to help us get there so that we can start these conversations with developers by not requiring too much parking so we can get them to where they need to be in the development review process. So to address the goals for the comp plan, we are doing that as part of the UDO rewrite, and over the next year, you'll be seeing those things coming in as part of the UDO. So we are working to address them. We didn't include them in this text amendment.
I got you. I just don't want us caught up in something that we don't want to see. When you say, well, I know Danny said, oh, well, that's the minimum. They could do more than that. We know that's not realistic. But my point is, if we're addressing that, why can't we address the desire to either have more recreation, more walkable space? Why isn't that an issue versus having more units per area? Because I think that's what we're going to get.
Okay. I would say for me, and this is just from my perspective, that once you start getting too deep into a text amendment, that especially with the UDO rewrite coming, and we're working on that, once we start having all these moving pieces and let's use the analogy of a plate of spaghetti. So you start touching one text amendment and it leads into another amendment, like this would be for the walkability and for the connectivity. And then you deep into another piece of spaghetti. It touches that we're working on the transit plan right now, and we're trying to figure out how to provide more transit for our citizens. And so that study is ongoing. We haven't finished that study yet, so we don't know what those answers are going to look like, but we know that we're getting there to those answers. So then that touches the other pieces of spaghetti. And so you have these constant moving parts that you're trying to coordinate together. And if we start doing a text amendment that touches on all these parts, we'll be doing the UDO rewrite, which is what we're doing in the meantime. So this was a bridge to get us to that point for the UDO rewrite, where we are looking at all those things and we are incorporating the form-based code so that we do look at walkability and sustainability and how our town looks and feels, and keep that small town charm and how things work, and where all those pieces come into play. So if you would like to see that with this, we can do that, but it becomes a bigger text amendment and a bigger project at that point. So this is kind of stripping it down to its most simple form, so you have a single text amendment to get us through to that next step. So when we do the overall UDO and that rewrite and that moving towards those other goals, not just goal 4 and LU2, but all the other goals in the comp plan, there's many in there, and we touch on all those goals to get us to that vision that we would like to see how the town will develop. That's that step that we're going to be moving towards. So you'll be seeing that in the future.
So I got you, and I'm good with the visitor stuff. The way this was summarized, it gave a different picture.
Okay.
So it could be summarized differently.
And the way I feel about it too, you're changing, and I understand what you're saying exactly. They're different pieces, different parts, everything else, but you're changing. Multifamily is going to be one thing now. Senior housing is going to be another, but they're both going to fall under the same green space requirements. Is that how that would work? I mean, that's a different part of the UDO.
That is a different part of the UDO. Right now, we're only addressing the parking.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Right.
And for multifamily dwellings, this is only changing the parking. So multifamily dwellings, whether it's senior housing or regular multifamily dwellings, will still have the same requirements that they do in the current ordinance. Right now, we are only addressing the parking issue.
Why are we doing a text amendment, though, which applies to every single senior community that comes here for it? Is that right? Mm-hmm. If we approve this text amendment, it's going to apply to any, whatever the senior housing definition is going forward until we change our UDO, correct? So why wouldn't we do some type of special use for this particular one? Help me understand that.
And I want to agree
And
with
then
her.
wait till the UDO. I don't understand the Band-Aid now if the UDO is that close.
Yeah, I feel like because we are redoing the UDO and the text amendment, and what we have in place at this time seems to be working pretty good. I don't want to change anything until we redo the UDO. But again, that's me.
So, Mr. Mayor, are we still in public hearing?
We are.
I'm
Still in
sorry.
the-
No, that's okay. No,
by
that's okay. I think we're taking public hearing. That's okay. May I add my public hearing comment based upon the conversation? Based upon the conversation, and based upon the applicant email today saying that they are not going to get the funding this year for this project, so the project will not occur this year. It would be my recommendation that this applicant, at this point, without this conversation, maybe tonight be done and we not act upon this and get the answers to the questions and wrap it into the context of the full UDO conversation, which is what you're talking about tonight. Therefore, we're not going to have any senior using housing, I don't believe, coming to the door in the next 6 to 8 months. Now, if we do, and that applicant comes and says, this is an issue, we might bring it back to you again. But at this stage, I don't think anything's going to happen in the next 6 to 8 months while we do the UDO. So it'd be my recommendation to get more answers to this, see how it blends in with the new rewrite of UDO, and work on this further under a rewrite of the UDO at this point.
Well, that's good information, Kelly.
Yeah.
Well,
Spent all that
no, I mean, I think prospectively, I think staff felt maybe this was something that would be supported and there would not be
I
as
think
many
definitely.
questions.
I think the concept
Yeah.
of this senior facility is something we want.
Right. Right.
The question is, and I think one of the things, that this side of the room is challenging is, when you come in and say you're gonna give up pavement for green space, we need to see the green space.
Right.
So, that was kind of presented, that was gonna be the deal, but listen to these two over here, they don't see the green space guarantee on, if you're
We
gonna
want
do
to see the
that.
matchup in the UDO.
Right, so, it sounds like we don't really need to be aggressive on this, but we do need a good, and, maybe 2 per unit is too much. Maybe something that covers the visitors plus, maybe 1 per unit, we could come up with that.
I think 1.5 per unit plus 4 spaces for every 10
Yeah.
units would be, I wouldn't vote for any less than that.
So, we could do that, and maybe, do you think this hindered anything from an applicant, wanting
No.
to build something here?
No.
Because I think we need a good, we do need a good, product, and I think you're working hard to get
Right.
that, Julie. A good product that when they come in and want to put a senior housing here, that we
Right.
have a good product that we can show them.
If something were to, if some interest was expressed over the next 6 to 8 months, our response would be, we're working on this. If it is a issue with that applicant, if it becomes a dire issue, we probably bring it to your attention and say, we might want to converse about this sooner than later. But this applicant says they're not going to be doing anything for the next year or 2. So it's my opinion that you have some time to resolve this and get these answers, and we'll make sure we address them when we do the UDO rewrite.
That's like, we don't want, just to put out there, we're not discouraging
That's
this in
right.
any way.
That's right.
But,
Oh.
yeah.
I understand.
Well, let's get through the public hearing, and, so any more questions for Julie?
None now.
None now.
Good.
All right, so I will entertain any comments from the public thank you, Julie.
You're welcome.
Just hang around, we may have a question for you, so, but, thank you. Any comments from the public in favor? Is anybody over there? Any comments from the public in opposition? Are there any final questions from the board to Julie? Well, I'm gonna close the public hearing then. Thank you, Julie.
You're welcome.
So, we don't have to take action, I don't guess. Do we? Okay.
do not.
All right, so let's leave it there and kind of inform us. I think you got a good idea of what we're looking for, I think.
I do. I took notes while I was up here, so we'll be prepared as part of the UDO rewrite on what you would like to see.
And I wasn't trying to take you far off. I was trying to understand how it works in concert. So if you present something to me, I'm like, oh, so these are all my apples in the barrel. And
Right.
then when that apple was left off, I'm like, wait a minute, what are we doing? So I hope you understand that.
No, it's good to have that whole vision, and what the text amendment does is drills down into one section of that vision.
Well, thank you. Great
You're welcome.
presentation.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Okay, thank you. Next item is presentation of the Cobblestone Development Project and draft economic development agreement between the town of Rolesville and the Cobblestone Development Group.
Mayor, if you can give us a minute, I think some folks would like to enter the room.
Okay.
Said that you were running late.
Yeah, I did. Yeah. Took you a little longer than you thought, I think, didn't it? Yeah. Well, you got here for the good thing.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, I think we're ready to proceed. I'll do the intro on this and then proceed. In the room tonight, you'll see that we have representatives of Cobblestone, and then after their presentation, we would like to bring in and zoom in Ashley Anderson, our consultant, also as a second part of this presentation, understanding that she will have to kind of zoom in and we'll have to kind of work through those logistics. But this is tonight essentially a presentation and discussion of the result of the last year in which we had our representatives of KDM development approach to town and express interest in pursuing a development of the town-owned land that is located at Young and Main Street. About 9 months ago, you agreed as a board to enter into an exclusive negotiation with KDM as a possible developer of this property. Since then, we have extended that exclusive negotiation agreement, I think twice, maybe 3 times. And then in addition, we approved an agreement that said that we were going to reach a development agreement with the developer and a purchase agreement actually on today was our last agreement. So we are here today to kind of show the result of our discussions publicly for the first time in a year. As you remember, this was stemmed from the Main Street plan, in which this site was identified as a catalyst site for this possible development with a public and private element, and the public element makes it an economic development element. That means it must include a public facility of some sort in the development. We had some knowledge of this site as far as infrastructure and such, but when we started this endeavor, it was very limited. So we actually had to go through, if you remember, the appraisal process. We had to go through identification of what was on the property, infrastructure, and then we ultimately had to negotiate the economic development agreement and the purchase agreement that is in front of you tonight as a draft and for your consideration over the next 2 months. So that's why it took so long. And on top of that, we had a pandemic set in, which kind of set us back a little bit on our process and making sure that first we were having difficulty communicating and meeting some deadlines, and then ultimately economics, we had to make sure the economics lined out still with the project. But tonight, the developer now known as Cobblestone is here to present their development. They are going to do this presentation over the next 20 minutes or so. Possibly some questions from you if you are so inclined. And then we have Ashley Anderson, our consultant, who helped us work on the economic development agreement, and also in the packet is a purchasing agreement. What I would recommend tonight is the essentially first step of the public step of consideration of this agreement and this relationship. And it would be my recommendation that we take about a month for this information to get out in the community, that you gather more information, gather more questions based upon what you hear tonight, based upon the information in the packet, and that we come back to this on August 18th in an informal manner to kind of check back in and see if what your thoughts are, if you have questions, if there's been any further modifications to the project. Then after the August 18th session, it would be time to kind of talk about, is there more that's needed to be done on this project? Are you still interested in this project? And determine, if you are still interested, then what would be needed for you to continue down a path of this agreement. And also, ultimately, this agreement requires at least one public hearing. There may be more. but I do not recommend scheduling that public hearing until you're ready. I think you need to make sure that you get this to a place where you feel like you have done your work, you feel like you can support this, but you also want to make sure you take public comment on it formally. That is a requirement of the Economic Development Agreement, and actually answer that question more specifically if you have that tonight. So with that being said, I'm not certain that you need to spend a lot of time tonight answering questions unless there's specific questions arise in a presentation or with Ashley. I would suggest this is your time to absorb the information, learn tonight, and then spend the next month asking questions and gaining information as you need. So, yes, Mr. Wilson.
I understand that the LLC is Cobblestone Crossing LLC.
Yes, sir.
The board would like to know the names of the principals in the LLC. Is that a proper question to ask?
I think they can bring that up. They'll do that during the presentation.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
I can tell you right now.
Yes.
Yes, it'll be.
Okay.
So let's if you're okay with that intro, I will turn it over to Representative Kenyon Burnham to introduce his team and let him take off with the presentation, if you're good. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me tonight. I really appreciate it. Commissioners of the board, Madam Mayor Pro Tem, Mr. Mayor, it's been a lot of hard work getting to this point, and we really appreciate the opportunity to present this to you guys today and put it up for consideration for the ultimate development here. I want to start off just by thanking the town staff. They have been really fantastic throughout this entire process. It's not been easy. It's been a lot of intense discussions and very intricate details involved in a project like this. So, I really wanted to extend my gratitude to them, all the work they've put into it to get us to this point over the last year. So let's talk about what we're bringing to Rolesville. When we first started this project, we referred pretty heavily to the Main Street Vision Plan. We wanted to draw a lot upon what had been laid out in that in order to try to help guide the ultimate product that we were going to put in front of you guys. So based upon that, I kind of broke it down to the three abilities, is what I've been calling them: walkability, bikeability, and accessibility. Walkability is pretty self-explanatory. We've done quite a bit to engage in that concept. Plenty of sidewalks throughout the property. The idea being that from a long-term perspective, you'd be able to walk throughout the entirety of downtown Rolesville without having to travel too far on foot to really get to anything that you're looking for. Bikeability pretty much goes hand in hand with walkability. Lots of bike racks involved in the project itself. Opportunity for people to bike in as opposed to drive, and it just gives more opportunity for alternative transportation, one might say. Accessibility was pretty self-explanatory as well. This product wound up being right in the heart of downtown Rolesville, the village core, one might call it. So that was sort of the driving factors to a product like this. Moving along from there, boutique and local businesses were a pretty high on our list of focuses as far as a project like this goes. Lafayette Village, as you are all quite familiar with, is all local and boutique businesses. We anticipate a lot of that here as well, but we also hope to bring a slight flavor of some larger companies as well that might help to enhance that concept quite a bit. The project itself has 40,900 square feet of retail space, which will ultimately allow for about 10 to 12 storefronts, we believe. We anticipate that about 6 to 8 of these will end up being restaurants and breweries, and the rest will be a mix of kitschy retail shops and the like that. Talking about restaurants, we have I'm going to walk over here real quick just to point it out. Here we have what we consider to be a possibility for a 2-floor restaurant option with rooftop bar possibility. That would end up totaling about 7,600 square feet and would hold to be a pretty good, one might call, anchor tenant for the product itself. Again, our focus has really been on hitting that village concept. We want something that people are going to live at, work at, eat at, play at, shop at. You can extrapolate from there. A lot of that really comes from the fact that the Main Street Vision Plan had a survey done within it that said 80% of Rolesville residents who responded to that town survey had said that they were dissatisfied with the current retail options out there. So, obviously, there's been a large representation of retail, and I think we've done a good job of taking advantage of as much of that street frontage as we possibly can by really, placing storefronts along as much as possible. Event centers, gathering places, and civic uses. That was a very big component of what the board had requested and something that we believe to be very important as well in our end. As you guys know, Lafayette Village leans quite heavily on the concept of event marketing, is what we call it. we throw very large, well, not very large, but we throw pretty sizable, village parties, we almost call them, where people from surrounding the immediate community will come in and, enjoy a pig roast or a village, and one might call it a French-themed market within it as well. So we see lots of opportunity for something like this at this location as well, and we've designed the product to focus around a central green area, as you can see off to the left of the product there, and I've got up on this board as well, focused around that central green area that'll help enhance that event space both for the town and for ourselves as well. Community center, civic use, outdoor dining, of course. Outdoor dining is a large part of what we like to do. There will be plenty of opportunity for restaurants that that are situated along the green and in the main plaza area to have dining outdoors and really take advantage of the fact that we have beautiful weather down in North Carolina. Civic use is pretty self-explanatory. We have the municipal building located right here as well. It's about 18,200 square feet of, we're calling it municipal flex space. We know that part of the process is still determining exactly what will end up, what use that'll end up becoming, or being, what use that'll end up taking. Outside of that, that's sort of how we got to this ultimate design here, just based off of all those, we've been calling them buzzwords, but really concepts that the Main Street Vision Plan had presented to us at the beginning of this process. So moving on to more of a project overview here, we anticipate this project is going to cost about $40 million in development costs from a mixed-use perspective. By mixed use, I mean solely the multifamily product and the retail product there as well. We have determined that the ultimate stabilized market value of that product will be somewhere in the $45 million range. Obviously, this is going to be quite a sizable development, to help really revitalize the downtown district of Rolesville. Really try to draw people down there to shop, live, eat, play, as we've been seeking to do. Breaking it down a bit more specifically, we have 178 multifamily units currently shown on the plan. That number could increase to 182, and I'll explain that in a moment. 12 townhomes on site and 57 townhomes on the Broughton property that will be ultimately incorporated into the downtown overlay district. Right across the street, if you guys are familiar with it, it's just across from where Scarborough Street comes out. 40,900 square feet of retail, I mentioned, 18,200 square feet of municipal flex space that the town will ultimately occupy, and then 3,800 square feet of flex space. So that when I referred to that two-story restaurant building earlier, we do anticipate the possibility of a restaurant just wanting to occupy the first floor or only part of the second floor. So we have left that second floor as flex space because you may end up being offices, may end up being additional multifamily units, which is why that 182 number we've mentioned that 182 unit number just to put that out there on the front end. It's a total square footage of 62,900 square feet. That obviously, again, just going back to the point that we wanted to take advantage of as much of that road frontage as we could, given that this property abuts on both Main Street and Young Street. We wanted to take advantage of the fact we're sitting right at that intersection as well. Moving on, we have 484 on-site parking spaces, and we'll get into the parking study a bit more with my engineer in just a moment, 4 of which will be electric vehicle spaces and 40 of which will be bike rack spaces. The part I'm really excited about is the event space, sitting, again, right up front of our main building there. That's going to encompass about half an acre. To be precise, it's 0.44 acres, or 18,976 square feet of just the green space. We anticipate that being a co-space between us and the town, where you guys will throw your events and we'll throw ours, and it'll be all fine and wonderful. Outside of that, we also have the opportunity for what we're calling flex hard space. These roads right here and right here are being designed, or these parking lots right here are being designed to have the opportunity to shut them off and expand the amount of event space we have available to us. Obviously that gives quite a bit of leeway in the type of event you want to throw, the kind of, the number of people you're looking to have there. You can go on and on. I'll let you get there yourself. And I'll turn it over to Marty Bizzle just for a second to talk about the parking study and, the on-street parking spaces and how we've gone ahead and taken a shared use approach to that.
Good evening. My name is Marty Bizzle with Bass, Six and Kennedy Engineers in Raleigh on Chapel Hill Road, 6310 Chapel Hill Road. Been a pleasure to work on this project as well. We have, as far as the parking goes, we have looked at a concept that is fairly routine, fairly used quite often in a mixed-use development where we call it a shared parking type scenario, which basically just shows that all the parking spaces are not utilized 24 hours a day when you're in a mixed-use development. When you have apartment residents and you have retail, just for instance, when the apartment residents are going to work, the retail places of business are open. So basically, there is a opportunity to share those parking spaces. So, and vice versa, when the retail closes down at night, the residents come home after work. So it is a true sharing of those parking spaces. And as you can see from the site plan, they are distributed all throughout the development. So with that, we look at what the peak time or the peak demand would be for those parking spaces. And that's what we basically base our parking requirement on. And that is our parking demand. So what we have done is gone and looked at what that peak would be, and then we have laid this out, and we exceed what that peak would actually be. And that could be for events when they're happening on the Village Green there, as well as utilizing some of the on-street parking. So we feel like this concept works well. We've seen some of these developments actually come to fruition and have not seen parking problems. But it's a good way of not over parking a development, but actually using more of what they actually parking demand would really be. So it's just a brief overview of what that shared parking concept looks like.
Just as a quick mention, part of the reason we've also decided to pursue this strategy is another thing we pulled from the Main Street Vision Plan, page 113, which recommends a shared use approach to it. And again, I would please stop me if you have any questions as we're going through it. I know if not, no problem. But I just
one
want
question I have.
Sure.
He mentioned the parking and all, and I know we tweaked this thing several times. It
Yeah.
appeared as more parking than the last time I saw it. Is that a perception? Have you added parking to it, or is it about the same?
No, you're good. That's a good point there. There is actually some more parking. You can see some of the property is obviously taken out from this site plan, but as far as probably the amount of spaces, it did not really hurt the project as much. If you're looking at a ratio, we're pretty much coming out probably a little bit more, for what's shown on the site plan now. So no, that's a good point.
And you're not using our standards, you're using Raleigh's standards for parking.
That is correct.
That's going to be we need to be brutally honest and upfront with you, because I know these board members, that's not gonna fly.
And that's something we can address as we move forward, obviously. But I do understand the concern for parking, and I hope to continue to prove the ratio we're looking for here, and help further explain it as we move along. Moving along here, I'd like to talk about the economic impact of the development just briefly. Actually, I already got it all written down, so it's okay. So obviously, it's a pretty sizable investment. It's going to have a very positive impact on Rolesville's economy. From a construction job perspective alone, we're looking at about 30 to 40 people working there per day, which will yield over the life of the project 10,000 construction days, we call that. So that essentially means that you have 30 people there per day over the course of a 700-day project. That ends up being about 10,000 days of work for people. Retail and service jobs. We will end up with, and of course these are all estimates and something we'll continue to justify as we move along. But we anticipate about 200 full-time equivalent jobs, which is about 267 part-time positions out there, which we anticipate will generate a total annual payroll of somewhere between $5 to $7.5 million for the citizens of Rolesville. Municipal jobs, there's a substantial opportunity for municipal expansion within the 18,200 square feet of municipal flex space, and of course the property tax revenue from a project like this. This will of course be one of Rolesville's larger developments, and we'll have a pretty substantial property tax revenue coming back to the town, which is always fantastic. Any particular questions on that? Oh, we're good there. Fantastic. Moving along, as you'll notice, we have removed the Wilkins property from the development here. That ended up happening for a couple of different reasons. One of the reasons is that economic conditions, such as they are right now, have kind of suggested that it might be best to scale back the project slightly. Above and beyond that, we've also found that the ratio of parking is better as a result of this slightly scaled back product, where we've now dropped about 8,300 square feet of retail and 40 residential units from the overall development. I know another one of the concerns obviously has been traffic flow and overall impact to that downtown intersection. Reducing the scale of the project we've also found will help with that quite substantially. Not that there was an issue with it beforehand, but the new traffic impact analysis that represents this slightly smaller product will look even better in my opinion, which we will be producing as we move along. The Privet building is, we are currently in the process of working out a licensing agreement with the Privet building that is still cornering the intersection. I've gone ahead and had a rendering drawn up as to what that'll look like with him sitting out there, and we found that it really does a good job of kind of holding that historical value to Rolesville, maintaining that intersection, and keeping away from just making it look like we've dropped a giant new development in the middle of a product. So it's helping to maintain that historical value. Moving along, obviously there's a lot of overhead power lines that run along the property on both sides there. We are currently in the process of working an agreement with Duke Energy to put a plan together to get that done. That'll end up being a relatively simple part of the process, luckily enough. So we were in the process of getting that figured out. The Greenway connection. This is actually one of my favorite parts of the property, to be honest with you. I'm going to come over here just to do this part real quick, if that's all right. As you guys know, there's currently a Greenway trail that comes out of the property and then dips off right around down here. Part of what we'll be doing is realigning that Greenway trail to run along the edge of the property so we can put our townhomes back here. We will end up having a plug-in right here for people to park. To access the park, as you all know, there's a dirt lot right here that's going to be removed as part of the project. That'll be replaced by this new parking lot here, and we're also in the process of talking very preliminarily with JG over there about possibly moving a new dirt lot over in this area, but again, that's very early in the stages and something that we'd like to explore though. Moving along, the really cool thing that I like about this a lot though is that when we end up plugging in right here, this will plug that Greenway trail in via sidewalks right to Young and Main Street, which will actually take the downtown intersection of Rolesville and tie it all the way into Wake Forest, if you can believe it. So it'll be pretty, kind of a neat little aspect of Rolesville that we can all brag about the fact that you can walk from Rolesville to Wake Forest along the Greenway. So I think that's one of my favorite parts of the aspect of the project. I just like the idea that you can walk from there all the way to Wake Forest if you so please.
Kenyon.
Yes.
So those 3 rows of townhouses, are they behind that, or are they attached to where that apartment house is?
So if you this is the match line right here. So if you basically pick this up,
that's what I thought.
right here, and it
Okay.
shoot up the top. Yeah, it just obviously doesn't show that well if you've got it.
But you're saying right where that first townhouse row of townhouses is, that's where your parking lot or dirt lot would be that you're talking about?
It'll be a paved lot here.
Oh, there, okay.
The dirt lot we're talking about maybe doing will be over on the other side. And again, I'm working out something with JG. I haven't actually gotten out there to map out where that would go exactly and the impact of something like that to the park itself. And it's something we'll come back to down the line. And then of course, that'll be that plug-in to that match line just goes right there.
Yep.
Gives you a general idea. Nice and accessible. Let's see, where was I on here? Some of the key recommendations from the Main Street Visiting Plan that we really tried to, hone in on. The text amendment and new UDO, as you guys know, that's all underway right now. Downtown Overlay District will be a large component of this project. Obviously, it being a slightly different use that you guys foresee for your downtown corridor, we want to be able to fit that use into the legal standpoint. So that'll come along as we move further in this project. Let's see. Getting myself lost here. Okay, here we go. So another one of the key recommendations for the Main Street Vision Plan, page 117 to be specific, I guess I wrote that down, is to establish a form-based overlay district to guide development along the Main Street corridor, focused on creating a vibrant walkable place. So that vibrant walkable place component is something I really wanted to hit. That's a quote from there. Obviously, the vibrance is there. I hope. Obviously, it's a bit more opinionated, but I hope you guys like the idea that the architectural concept we're going after here with a southern southern Charleston kind of mixed vibe out there. Obviously, it's quite walkable, as I said earlier. Moving along here, road frontage, mixed-use buildings and with active ground floor uses, civic structures in behind. We obviously played to that, in my opinion, as well as we could have. You got the mixed-use buildings. I'm going to walk back around to probably should have brought this a little bit closer to make it easier for myself, but We've got our mixed-use buildings up along the road frontage along here as well, with the civic unit in behind it, and of course we've also added the residential component all the way towards the back. Moving along here, implementation of on-street and public parking. Obviously, we have quite a few out there right now. Currently, that number is at about 26. I am anticipating that we might be able to squeeze in 30, but I don't want to make any promises, so we're sitting at 25 to 26 right now. A mix of public and private investment. Obviously, that is hit by that blend of the civic use and the private use and the mixed development. Encourage mixed income quality infill housing within the core of downtown. Obviously, we have a mixed income product out here with the multifamily aspect as part of the retail component, right in the core of downtown, of course. Create a variety of public spaces in downtown to support programming of varying scales. Again, going back to that green space and that flex hard space that we've put together out here. We do anticipate, quite a few events, working with the town, some private events as well, that'll be able to take full advantage of that green space and that flex hard space out there. And then just to kind of put a bookend on the back of it, and then we can kind of take it a bit more to a direct question aspects. So there's a quote that I wrote down from the Main Street Vision Plan at the very beginning of this project, or this process that I brought to Klein and to B&K to sort of give them an idea of what we were looking for out here and what the town would like as well. So that quote is as follows: "The scale of this quaint, small town Main Street as essentially 2 blocks is a true asset," and I definitely agree with that there. "Many downtowns struggle because it is hard to sustain block after block of these small, independently owned shops. Rolesville can have a reimagined downtown center that is compact, vibrant, and highly walkable." So those 3 words are what we ended up writing down at the top of our planning board there: the compact, the vibrant, and the walkable. So and I hope you guys do agree with me that we've hit those three big categories in our ultimate product here. And I'd like to kind of send it back to you guys for a couple of questions. Maybe we can talk about traffic impact as well, and see what other components you'd like to know about.
I have a question. Could you just break down the numbers for me once again?
Yeah.
You said you have 178 units,
Correct.
plus how many townhomes, and then another 57 townhomes at Broughton?
Correct, yeah. So we have 178 to 182 multifamily units. Again, going back to that flex space we were talking about a little bit earlier. Yeah, 12 townhomes on site, and then 57 on the Broughton property. If you guys are familiar with Scarborough Road that shoots out, and then that big vacant piece of land there next to the Rolesville Historic Society, museum? Museum, sorry.
That's where Broughton is.
That would be the Broughton, directly across the street from it. So we've actually incorporated that into our ultimate traffic impact analysis that we're presenting to you guys. We would not try to slide that one in on y'all. That'll be, when we go to evaluate the traffic impact of a development like this, that'll be well incorporated into the Ramey Kemp's study of the product itself.
So you said it's across the.
Go ahead, I'm sorry, Sheila.
You said it's across the street from the museum or near the?
Oh, it's next door to the museum,
Next
right?
door.
So if you think about that big open land that's all around and behind it, it's right there. Yeah.
Kind of behind the museum,
Yeah.
but it goes over to the other street too.
So the 484 parking spaces that you mentioned, does that include the Broughton spaces as well?
It does not, no. So the Broughton spaces will have their own parking situation, their own town, garages, driveway, et cetera, visitor spots. Yep.
Okay, so 40 dwellings were taken away.
Correct. Yeah, 40 multifamily units.
Full
were
time,
taken. Yeah.
okay, but then 57 are still being added.
Well, those were originally part of the product at the front end of it, but yes, those are still part of it. Correct. I don't like to say added because it was, we were always intending on doing that across the street to try to help drive that retail out there. Additional customer base is always good for small restaurants and businesses and stuff like that. And then we have 40,000, again, I'll just reiterate these. I know I've said them a few times, but 40,900 square feet of retail. That's about 75% the size of Lafayette Village from a retail's perspective. 18,200 square feet of municipal flex space, obviously pretty sizable for y'all's use. And then 3,800 square feet of that flex space in there just to give us the option to either go 2 stories on that one restaurant, or if there's no takers, again, given the economic conditions, that'll give us the opportunity to either, do offices or, some other type of use.
The Wilkins property, is that completely out of play, or is that?
We did terminate our agreement with them again to help, as I explained earlier, help reduce the impact slightly. And
All right, and what will you be losing wise with that removed?
so it'll be 8,300 square feet of retail out and 40 multifamily units. So again, I figured reducing that multifamily component more substantially than the retail out of the two of them. Do we want to talk about traffic a little? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Just this space, just what we're seeing here,
Yep.
how much square footage is residential?
Square footage? Oh, mind if I pull my calculator out for that one? That would be that's a tough one to answer, I'm sorry. Let's see, what would- Be about, say 150,000 square feet of multifamily.
Right, 150,000 of residential.
Correct.
And then we've got 18.2 of municipal.
Correct.
Let's see, municipal.
And just on that,
And how much retail?
be between 40,900 and 44,700, depending on, again, what we end up doing with that second floor flex space that we're looking at. For
That includes your flex space?
the 44,700 includes the flex space, 40,900.
But not the municipal.
Not the municipal, no. Municipal is separate. It's
38.
So we're looking at, am I right, about 200,000 square feet?
north of it, yeah, but yes.
And 75% of that is residential.
If that math adds up, I would say about that. Yeah, I think it's a bit more towards I think we were at 67% or something like that with the final count.
Okay.
Yeah, just under 70.
And the total is 12 townhomes? That's the total
On site, yes.
amount?
12 on site, yes.
Okay, gotcha.
Then there's the 57 across the street, again, just to reiterate.
The other ones. I know this is specific, but is there a clock tower that we talked about?
Yes, of course. Now, I would not forget the clock tower. So. Yep, so the clock tower will be, so we've got our plaza drop-off loop here. Some of the things that, again, I'm not telling you guys what you want to put on. Some things that have been tossed around, some sort of community center, gymnasium type thing out there. So we incorporated a drop-off loop. Obviously, we have programming, drop the kids off, you let parents come on in, drop their kids off, and hopefully go park and have something to eat, and then, come pick them up later. Clock tower is sitting right there, facing that drop-off loop, which will, likely end up doing some nice, component there to kind of add to the facade of the building, the vibrance of it. That clock tower sits right there on that corner. And I can actually give you guys smaller copies of this if you'd like. I brought them with me. I'm not sure what we're doing with the whole handing out thing. I'll let you all decide on that and maybe hand them out later if that works better.
Yeah, we had one in our agenda package. The only
Yeah, so
difference is you got to carve out.
But without the carve out? And does it have the coloring and the some of the updated stuff? Okay, yeah.
Right.
So you've got the majority of it then. Should we talk about traffic a little bit, Marty? Do you want to talk about traffic?
Definitely.
Yeah, coming up. Yeah, sure thing.
Yeah, so I'm personally not working on the traffic study itself. Ramey Kemp and Associates are preparing that. But what you see on your on the site plan there are the product of discussions with NCDOT as far as the road improvements that they have proposed there. We have received those files from their consultant and incorporated those into the site plan. So they know about us and we know about them, and it's meshing together very well. So hopefully the traffic study, once it's completed, will bring all that together. But we feel like the improvements that are proposed by NCDOT are adequate to handle these traffic generations that we're showing right now.
Just a comment. So it's actually, and today we released our first draft of the design of the town interchange project with the LAP funding. So that'll have to mesh with this. And so we'll be making that decision and design element in unison with them. But ultimately, you get to choose what the design for that will be, and they'll have to match it up with this at the end of the day, as far as that intersection.
Okay, we have 2 points of ingress and egress on this site plan.
Correct. Yep.
Okay, the 3 buildings on the left, the townhomes, how do they connect into this, or do they connect into
They do.
this?
Yeah. So this match line right here, the dotted black line, Just for the sake of showing it better on the site plan, we moved it down here, but really this actually sits right here, if you're familiar with the
Okay,
site.
okay, all right, thank you, thank you.
Can I have a hard copy?
Yeah, of
Mine
course.
is not colored. Mine's not colored. Mine is black and
It
white.
looks a little bit better when there's some color on it. Let's get it
Yeah,
take off.
newer version.
Well, hand them from the middle, because the touch of the one.
Is that close enough to connect to Scarborough Street?
No.
Not, okay.
Thank you.
Now, what he's talking about is Carborough Street comes out in front of that Broughton property. If you
Okay.
think about going down, was it West Young?
Yeah, yeah, and I'm familiar with Scarborough, yeah, thank you, thank you.
Thank you. Keenan, is there phases involved in this, or will it be one?
Yeah,
One site?
we'll pretty much go through it all at once, but from the perspective of, yes, one building will kind of go up at a time following another. We anticipate starting, and that's actually probably a bit better addressed in the development agreement, so I'm not going to get too into it, but we anticipate starting with that main green space building, one of the residential buildings in the back, and I believe the municipal building is part of phase one as well. But really, from a construction perspective, we'll pretty much just be rolling right through the whole thing. Was that right?
What about the infrastructure, which is the parking and the lighting and all? Is that done one time, and the buildings come later, or?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that? I kind of missed the front end of that. I apologize.
Yeah, the infrastructure, the parking and the lighting and everything else to do with that, is that done one time, or it will expand as you put a building in, or how would that work?
That will expand, Mr. Mayor, as we develop the individual buildings. The parking required for each building will be built as we construct each building. The lighting, same way with it. It tends to work that way. That way you have no dark spots, no danger of anyone being hurt or whatever. So yes, sir, it will be expanded as we expand.
So it sounds like you'll start more on the street and span backwards. Is that kind of way it will work?
Yes, sir. Mhm.
How long would it take to build out this project?
About 2 years.
If you'd like me to give it more specific, I actually have a development timeline I brought with me. So going through that, project start, development timeline starts upon the signing of the development agreement, PSA, and approval of the zoning and/or text amendment for the town project and Broughton Properties. Initiation of the TIA, engineering and architectural work for the building plans. The building plans will take the longest, 120 days there. Building permit and closing on the PSA is probably about another 45 to 60 days there. We will go to site work at that point. Another 150 days on that, bringing us to a total of 315 to 330 days to prepare the site. And vertical construction is another 455 days after that. So it's 770 to 825 days total, which is 2 years, 2 months to 2 years, 3 months from the completion of our PSA development agreement and, approvals to get going.
One of our concerns is the Privet family who was there first.
Yeah.
And I understand you're working out some kind of parking easement agreement with them.
That is correct, yep.
Are you in active conversation with
Oh, yeah,
them?
yeah. In fact, I just had a conversation with him yesterday, I believe, or maybe the day
Yesterday.
before. Yeah, we were in the process of doing that with him. We only kicked it off probably about 2 weeks ago, a week and a half, 2 weeks ago. So we're still kind of trying to figure out what works for everybody there, but we are in the process of doing that, correct.
Would this be a good segue to go to Ashley and let her step through the development agreement and then see what questions come from that and then go from there?
Let's do that.
So Ashley is ready. I see her name up. I do want to preface that the development agreement she's going to review, and that was in your packet, was based upon the site plan that was in your packet, which included the Wilkins property. So when she goes through specific numbers, those will have to be modified and changed based upon what you just received tonight.
Okay. We've been going an hour and a half, so let's take a 5-minute recess
Okay.
and you get her up and running.
Yep, we'll do
In the
that.
meantime, and we'll come back.
This one?
Yep.
So far, so good.
Okay.
Okay.
Thought about all the people at home watching.
Go ahead. She's ready, I think.
All right, don't go ahead, Ash.
All right, so you just heard a
yes, what they want from this project. So, I know we've been through this a couple of times. I'm going to walk through the economic development agreement again. And as Kelly pointed out, there's been some recent changes to, the parcels that make up the properties, and the numbers have changed a little bit. And I'll talk about that as we get to them. Okay. So, we'll start with just a quick overview of the project, but let us hear, so Robin and Michael are gonna do my slides, correct? All right, so next slide, next slide. Okay, so we've been talking about this for several months. There's been a lot of negotiations. And a quick overview of the project: the town will sell Cobblestone, the properties located near the intersection of Main and Young Streets in downtown Rolesville. Cobblestone is partnering with the town to build a town center project on that property that will include space for residential, commercial, government, and public uses. In return, Cobblestone will entitle, design, and build the project, all as further described in this agreement, and as Kenyon presented earlier. So part one of the agreement talks about the project design requirements. So we've asked that Cobblestone provide an initial schematic design of the project to the town not later than August 18th. We've set forth some requirements for things that this initial design must include. We're going to start with a checklist of items. So the first on that list is a space for the Veterans Memorial. Some commercial space, and again, these numbers might change depending on how Kenyon has finalized things on his end. But at the time of writing, we anticipated that to be about 45,400 square feet of commercial space distributed amongst at least 5 buildings. A residential component, these numbers will change, but essentially the document will provide a cap for those numbers, and it will lay out exactly how many apartments and how many townhomes, and it will set a number of maximum buildings that they can contain a residential component. At the time of writing, that was 210 units, 198 apartments, and 12 townhomes, not among more than 9 buildings. We've also have a provision that no building that has a residential component may rise more than 3 additional stories above the ground. We are requiring that there's a dedicated public event space, a cornerstone town space, which would be where the clock tower and the municipal facility are. We want the plan to show all of the street lead-ins. We've also asked that they address parking. This includes no diagonal on-street parking on Main Street. They also have to provide for electric vehicle charging spaces. We've asked that they show the preservation of the town's existing trail. I believe Kenyon talked about that earlier tonight. At one point, the historic home at 113 West Young Street was going to be a part of the project. So if that is, the plan needs to show how they're going to accommodate that historic home. I know there was some discussion earlier about the Privet Insurance Building. So we've asked that the design show the developer's plans for accommodating the building into the development, whether that is leaving the building in place or a plan for its removal. Piggybacking on that, we've also asked that they provide copies of any signed agreement concerning the redevelopment of the building, or any parking or access agreements that may be required with the owners of the Privet building. Should the Broughton property be a part of the project, we've asked to see those development plans as well. We've asked that they submit an updated pro forma. This pro forma is going to be reviewed by an independent financial consultant of the town's choosing, so that it is properly vetted as any town investment would be. And lastly, we've asked them to include a development timeline that outlines their key steps of development. This wouldn't necessarily be a timeline with specific dates, but more of a, when we do X, 30 days from now, we'll do Y. All right. Part 2, we talk about the municipal facility. we know that, or we expect the municipal facility will be approximately 8,000 to 12,000 square feet. The town will work on its own to develop the final space programming needs and to design that facility. When it comes to ownership of the municipal facility, the town is considering two options: a lease and owning it outright. So we're going to walk through what each of those options would look like. First, we're going to walk through what it would look like if Cobblestone owned the municipal facility and leased it to the town. Under a lease arrangement, the facility must be available within 3 years of signing this agreement for the town to occupy it. It has to be designed to the town's specifications. The town is going to work to figure out what their space needs would be and to design that programming in the facility. Again, it'll be 8,000 to 12,000 square feet. It will, under a lease arrangement, it will have offices for the Parks and Rec Department, additional office, classroom, and programming space. The terms of the lease we expect will be at least 10 years, but it will not exceed 20 years. After 10 years, either party may terminate the lease by giving a 1-year notice to the other party. The rental rate, we expect that the lease payments will be at least sufficient to amortize the complete building cost over the lease term. So this would include soft costs like your architectural fees, engineering, but it would not include the cost of the land. So in North Carolina, anytime a municipality enters into a lease under this situation, they have to have it approved by the North Carolina Local Government Commission. So entering into the lease is contingent upon getting that approval from the LGC. We also know that the town's participation in the design and construction of the facility and making these lease payments may trigger the public bid law rules, and we'd have to follow that process. Generally, lease payments cannot begin until the building is available for the town to use it. And should the building be damaged by a fire or another natural disaster and is otherwise unable for the town to use it, then the lease payments have to stop. So on the next slide, we'll talk about what it would look like if the town owned the municipal facility itself. So in that situation, Cobblestone would deed to the town the site specified for the municipal facility in the July 13th elevations. I believe Kenyon may have pointed that out to y'all earlier. Cobblestone would deed the site back to the town. The town would then construct, design, and develop the final programming space for an 8,000 to 12,000 square foot facility. They're considering that space would serve a couple of different purposes. So first, it might
Question.
have offices for the town's Parks and Rec Department,
Ashley?
along with additional office and classroom programming space. So it'd be very similar to those uses under the lease arrangement.
Ashley, can you pause for just a moment?
Yes.
Commissioner Wilson has a question.
Going back to the previous slide, Cobblestone will deed to the town the site specified for the municipal building in the July 13th elevations. At what cost?
At no cost.
At no cost. Okay, thank you.
At no cost. Okay. So back to the purposes if the town owns it. The first would be very similar to if the town leased it. They would be the office space and programming space. If the town were to actually own the municipal facility, it's also considering use as a gymnasium or a commercial kitchen with facilities suitable to accommodate groups that match up to the size of the gym. So those are just a couple of options that the town is considering for its use of a municipal facility. Part 3 of the Economic Development Agreement talks about the requirements for the event space. So we've asked that Cobblestone provide a dedicated event space in their plan. That's approximately 1 acre. It's suitable for outside public gathering and events. It's a combination of grassy areas and some paved spaces. It'll include at least 18,976 square feet of dedicated event space. I think Kenyon pointed that out earlier. Cobblestone is going to work with the town to determine the final design of that space. When it comes to maintenance, Cobblestone is going to maintain the event space safely in a well-maintained condition that is similar to that, up to the same standards that the town maintains its park property. Cobblestone is going to carry liability insurance on the event space, and it's going to designate the town as an additional insured. The town gets to use the event space for 21 calendar days each year. That's at least 15 days that are holidays or weekends. And the town and Cobblestone have already agreed to meet in September to talk about which days they're going to divvy up, and they'll meet every year in January to talk about maintenance and how that's going. The next part talks about the phasing for the project. So we've got a couple of requirements for phase one. We've asked that no later than 30 days after this economic development agreement is signed, we want Cobblestone to provide drawings, plans, and technical information sufficient to constitute a formal application to the town's technical review committee for its consideration of Cobblestone's first planned phase of the project development. We've asked that as a part of this first phase, Cobblestone include at least half of the commercial space. Right now that works out to be about 22,750 square feet. The first phase must also include the municipal facility, the event space, the privet building disposition, and should the historic home be a part of it, we've asked that whatever they're going to do with that be a part of phase one as well. You'll see there's no limit on the amount of residential space or units that may be included in the first phase. We've also asked that they not apply for a permit for grading or other site work until Cobblestone has confirmed that they have the appropriate construction drawings and entitlement to begin construction on at least one building on the property. We want to make sure that the grading and site work is reasonable and match up to their timeline of work. Next, we've set forth other Cobblestone requirements. So we want to make sure that each stage of the project is materially consistent with all of the design requirements outlined in part one. I think you also received those as a checklist of Cobblestone's obligations. Safety and the function of intersections has been a concern. So we've asked that Cobblestone submit a TIA showing that any intersection of Young or Main Streets with the property will have no adverse effect on the function of the intersections. So any improvements they make in that general downtown area has to maintain or improve the function level. When it comes to additional phases, I believe Kenyon said they anticipated this just being one phase, but should it break into more phases, we've asked that Cobblestone apply for the entitlements of subsequent development phases within 90 days of obtaining a certificate of occupancy for the last building in the previous phase. We want to make sure the ball keeps rolling. We've also required that it not exceed 3 phases of development. The economic development agreement will include a list of prohibited uses. These uses will be consistent with those listed in the town's UDO. We talk a little bit about the use of the completed facilities. So any completed facilities that are a part of the project must be open to all town residents on the same basis as for people residing within the property. This includes with respect to fees for membership. So for example, if there's a health club on the property, they can charge a membership fee, but they cannot give a discount to those that live on the property. The fee has to be the same with respect to those who live in the city of Rolesville, or the town of Rolesville, excuse me, and on the property. So now we're going to talk a little bit about cooperation. This sort of outlines our general expectations for how the relationship with Cobblestone and the town will be throughout the partnership. So first, we've asked Cobblestone to provide within 10 days of receipt copies of any reports or other documents that they produce relating to the property of the project. We've also asked that they advise the town manager on a proactive basis and in a timely manner whenever any timeline or deadline changes. We just want them to be proactive and keep us involved so we're not nagging after them, why hasn't this been done? We've asked that they provide the town with copies of any existing floor plans or pro forma on request. We're not asking them to create new reports, just anything they have at the time we ask, we're asking them to turn it over.
Ronnie.
Cobblestone will also involve the town manager or his designee in the process with other governmental entities. This could include participation in calls or conferences and document sharing as they relate to the project or the property.
Ashley, I'm going to interrupt you again. Commissioner Wilson has a question.
Yes.
In the sharing of documents, does that include soil studies and rock borings?
Yes.
I think I heard you.
Okay.
Did you ask if it includes, sharing documents includes soil studies? And I did not hear the last part.
Rock borings.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so we talk a little bit about monthly board reports and appearances before the town board. So we've asked that starting with the first full month after the agreement is signed, we've asked Cobblestone to provide a written narrative report summarizing the development activity for the previous month. We've also provided that at the town's request, Cobblestone has agreed to provide an appropriate representative to appear before the town board, to provide a narrative update on the project, and to provide full and complete answers to questions from the board members. We don't expect that they'll be asked to appear before the town board more than 3 or 4 times a year. Okay. On the next slide, we talk about the delivery of work product. So if Cobblestone, this gets to the previous question. So if Cobblestone does not proceed with the project, they shall make available at no cost to the town and for its unrestricted use all available work product related directly to the property and the project that is in possession and control of Cobblestone. So this includes market analysis, soil and engineering reports, geotechnical reports, environmental reports, studies and testing, construction budgets, and other documentation produced specifically related to the property and the project that is within Cobblestone's possession and control. Okay. All right. So the next part of the agreement talks about the town's obligations. So first, the town is going to sell the property to Cobblestone pursuant to a purchase agreement. The town is going to partner with Cobblestone to work on the utilities, the sidewalks, and other general improvements to the project. So the town is going to apply amounts it's received under its Main Street LAP grant for public improvements between Burlington Mills Road to Young Street. This equals approximately $3,700,000 in funding that will benefit the project and includes approximately $735,000 in direct town funding. The town is going to partner with Cobblestone on the undergrounding of the utilities. So the town will contribute a maximum of $250,000 toward the cost of undergrounding the utilities at the Main Street intersection. There will also be some credits against town fees. We anticipate that they will be around $160,000. So once Cobblestone gets a building permit for the first building of each development stage, the town is going to provide the following credits to the developer. The credits will only be up to the amount of the fee that would have otherwise been payable. So Cobblestone is eligible to receive credits against the Parks and Rec fee. This means it would receive a credit against any amount previously paid towards the site design, programming, building, parking, or equipping of the municipal facility. So under the ownership structure where the town owns the building, this may affect the site there. On the next slide, we're going to talk about the commercial construction incentives. We anticipate they will be about $90,000. So subject to the town approval of the pro forma, Cobblestone will receive approximately $90,000 in performance-based incentives. These incentives will be paid on the first of the three, February 1st, after a building receives its certificate of occupancy and has been assessed property taxes on the completed building that were due on or before the previous October 1st. These payments will be equal to roughly 50% of the property taxes that were actually paid with respect to that building in the previous 6 months. So for the total development incentives, we put a cap. So including the town's contribution to the undergrounding of utilities, any credits against fees owed to the town, the performance-based commercial development incentives, they will not exceed $500,000. The rest of the agreement goes through sort of the necessary evils of notice provisions and dispute resolution. I've not outlined that in this presentation, but they are there. We hit the meat of the agreement. So if anybody has any questions or wants me to repeat or clarify or go back, I'm happy to do so.
Ashley, the reference to the underground utilities stated at the intersection of Young and Main. So does it include the frontage of the development on both streets, or is it just the intersection only?
I believe it includes both. That's probably a question for Michael or one of the town's staff that has the design in front of them.
Charles, I want to try and explain it, make sure, do I show it on there, where since the project goes from?
Yeah, the agreement makes it sound like it's just the intersection.
It will be, the lines will be lowered on the total frontage of the property that we are developing, beginning here, around all the way down to here. It may run a little further, Mr. Mayor, depending on how we transition down and back up. That's not quite determined yet.
So you,
Here, I believe that was Charles. I could not hear his answer.
yeah, he was saying the road frontage, but the agreement doesn't read that way. But maybe it's a technicality or whatever.
We can certainly clarify it. I believe it was
You take the same.
designed to encompass the area where the project is.
Okay.
They're on the frontage. Good.
Yeah, that's good.
There will actually, Mr. Mayor, there will actually be a due plan submitted to the town. Once we finalize, we're right in the middle of doing that now. There'll be a plan submitted where you can visually see very clearly what's going to be done.
Right. I just think we got a probably wordage problem in the agreement here. Sound like the understanding is correct. Any other questions? I think Ash was asking for questions from the board. Any other questions on the agreement?
The underground utilities, we're saying we'll pay a maximum of $250,000. Do we have anything in there that says we will pay a percentage of the total cost? I don't want to spend $250,000 if the total thing is $350,000. Like, are we paying up to 50% of the total cost, or are we? I don't know if we have anything in there for that.
But our max is 500,000 anyway, total.
Yeah, I heard estimate larger than that. Do we know estimate, what the estimate is, or?
We're protected either way.
We do, and again, we're working towards tweaking that to fit the property that we are developing. The initial estimate, which was for a much greater span was close to $1 million from due for boring, put it in there. A lot less than what they were going to do. So, again, the right, very close to being able to bring you something, just not quite there yet.
Yeah, I think the commissioner was asking, can we put a percentage in there too, and or, so it wouldn't go over, we wouldn't pay over 50% of the cost.
I wish the 250 would cover the 50%.
Yeah.
I think we're safe.
Yeah, like.
You hear
just
that,
so you're
Ashley?
paying up and-
Is that, you got that?
I believe you asked if we could put a percentage in there, so that it would be $250,000 or not to exceed 50% of the total cost,
Right.
correct?
That's
Think-
correct, yep.
We can certainly do that. That just hadn't been a part of the negotiations this far.
Thank you. Any other questions from the board here? All right. Well, thank you, Ashley. Is she done, or you got another?
Yeah, no,
piece?
I think if you want to go through the purchase agreement, Dave is ready for that, but we've been through that. It's a purchase agreement that's in your packet. We can spend a moment on that, or I think, Dave, do you think you want to spend a moment on that real fast and describe that?
What changed since last time we met on it?
It has been so long. This is certainly the first time I believe that it has been in an open session. So just very quickly, the purchase price is $2,080,000 for the land assemblage. It would be signed as a purchase agreement at the same time, following a public hearing on the sale. At the same time, we sign the economic development agreement if we choose to do that. Closing would be 30 days following receipt of all the entitlements for the project. All the approvals have been made by the town, and no more than 120 days after the date of the contract. Based upon Kenyon's timeline, and I may have misunderstood it, that may need to be 150 days based upon his approval numbers, but we'll check that. I doubt that's material to our consideration, but those should mesh. So at the time they expect to come out of entitlements, plus some time for the lawyers to get the project closed. And then the final feature of this is that in the event, following 16 months after the signing of the purchase agreement and hopefully a closing, the town would have the right to repurchase the property if the developer has not gone vertical with the project for $2,080,000 to take the property back, and that purchase would be subordinate only to the purchase financing. So any construction financing would need to be subordinate to that right. So if we needed to, we could take the property back in the event the project did not materialize. And I think that's the highlights. If there are any questions.
Lost me at the end on the subordinate
Sure.
part. Break it down for me in layperson's terms, please.
The challenge for a repurchase agreement in a commercial project is that the developer buys the land for, in this case, $2 million, but then needs to put $40 million or $38 million worth of improvements on it, and may need to do that via a loan from the bank. If the developer has placed $40 million of loans on the property before our repurchase option comes up, our repurchase option isn't worth very much because we're behind $40 million of debt, as a banker would know. So we'll be only behind, at most, the acquisition debt.
Thank you.
Sure.
So I think we've come to the conclusion of this tonight. It's Michael and Kenyon's intent to make this information available on the website, our website, and then also a link, continue link to the KDM website.
The Foxville group, but yes.
Fox, thank you.
Yeah.
And I'm going to let them coordinate that and get this out there this week. Any public comment or your ability to meet with the developer or meet with staff is your privilege over the next few weeks to gain more information. But it's all there now for you to kind of sort through And at this stage, we're going to come back on August 18th and kind of see what updates there are that may have occurred over the last month. And then any further questions you may have, and see where we are on your perspective on this. So at this point, I think we are done for tonight on this item, and we'll kind of let it go until August 18th.
So I know at some point in time we'll have a public hearing.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any type of public, meeting, just a meeting scheduled for the public, anything? I know we did one before, but. No?
Not at this time, and kind of hard in this, but if that's something comes out of your August 18th session, we could do that if that's an interest to you all. But there is nothing scheduled between now and August 18th.
Okay.
And at August 18th, we,
Just kind of comes back to you and see where we are.
okay.
What does that mean? That feels so vague.
Well, it's kind of a work session topic time, and say, where is the board on this development agreement now? Where did we hit? Is everything addressed? What's been modified and changed? It's not trying to put you in a position to vote on anything. It's allowing you to absorb this information now, ask questions if you have them further on August 18th. But it's really just kind of check in to see, are you ready to schedule a public hearing for this or not, or what further needs to be addressed?
So the goal between now and August 18th is give the public time to weigh in?
Or you to gain more information.
So we are free to give these gentlemen a call
Yes.
if we have questions.
Please do, actually. In fact, I was just about to say, I would really encourage you to please reach out to me through Michael. I'm here at your convenience to help answer questions, alleviate concerns, whatever needs to be done, please.
Yeah, I think another way to put it maybe is, we want all our questions answered and everything, clear from the board before, we have a public hearing and
I'm glad you said it, Ronnie.
So make sure if you got questions or if you got, issues still, you flush it out with the staff or, whatever. Because come is the 18th, August 18th?
Mm-hmm.
Come the 18th, I think what the staff is asking is, we're ready to go for the public hearing and
Or you come out of that saying we want to do something further as a group. Right now, there's no real formula for this. It's our first, there isn't a set formula for this. So right now, we're just kind of still gathering information and making sure you're understanding what the project is and allow public to talk to you and allow them to talk to you. From August 18th, you may establish a format that you want to move forward on. So
my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm kind of learning like everybody else is, but the next two things we want to get done is to approve these two agreements.
And then you also need to start soon talking about the UDO amendment for the downtown mixed use.
Right.
And that needs to happen fairly soon, so that can move ahead too. So that can follow this. If everything worked out, they could follow fairly quickly behind this, so they would know what the UDO amendments are that they are then going to be submitting to technical review committee and get going on their development project and land entitlements.
But for these two agreements that we went over tonight,
Yes.
Technically speaking, if we have a public hearing a couple meetings after the 18th, then we could vote on it then.
That's correct.
And I just want to drive home a point because I know there are issues. But I'm speaking from a developer's point of view. As you know, I was involved with Granite Falls, and in fairness to these developers and these people here, if you've got issues, and I know some of you have, they need to know it on the 18th. It doesn't need to come down, here's a site plan, and we say, oh, wait a minute, we haven't talked about this. These people need to know it in fairness to them.
Thank you very much. Yeah, that would be fantastic. Thank you.
Lots of trees.
Okay.
Ashley, anything you have to add? I see you're listening pretty.
I'm just listening. I couldn't hear that last little bit that Commissioner Wilson said. So, but you've got time to get the project right and make sure that it's what you want, and I think it'll be good.
Thank you.
So with that said, why is there no, and maybe you all are going to do this, no public session scheduled for the public to weigh in? Because I know it's one thing to put it out on the website, right? It's one thing to put it on the website. It's a whole nother thing to have, I know you can't have a big in-person session, but even if you had a virtual session or something, whether it's the town or the developers, I'm just saying, it just feels like we're just saying we're just gonna put it on the website, see what happens. That
Well,
doesn't always draw maybe the attention that it deserves.
Yeah, I'm not pretending what the right process is. If you had some time, or if they want to volunteer that between now and August 18th, they might hold that session. Or if you think that's a good idea, you might want
I'm
to
just
vocalize.
asking a
Yeah.
question, Kelly.
Yeah. We don't have a process for this. So on August 18th, if we feel like there's something more needed, what I'm trying to do is avoid setting up something when you're not ready for a public hearing, a formal public hearing. So however you get there, that's up to you.
I'm not talking about a public hearing. though.
No, I understand.
Okay, I just want to make sure we're clear.
You're talking
Right.
about a community
Right.
meeting.
Right.
And maybe that's a good idea. Maybe they're willing to coordinate that and publicize something between now and August 18th and hold that session and let people come in, tune in, and learn more about it. That probably is a good idea. They
You
might
guys
be-
willing to do that?
I think, oops, sorry, go
I
ahead.
am not suggesting that. I was simply asking a
I think
question.
it's a good idea, though.
Because we're here on the 21st, and you're saying, come back the 18th, and we'll see maybe a couple meetings. It feels very loose, and I'm not sure why. So if you're trying to get some input from the public, why not put some effort behind? Let's get some public input to see if there's some big things that stand out to us. That's all I'm saying. Whether it's the town leading it or you all leading it. That way you have some insight, so if there are some big things that stand out, they can be addressed by August 18th, instead of waiting to the 18th.
Yeah.
Yeah, and hoping for the best.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea.
Well, it's gonna be challenging with COVID.
Yeah.
Right,
but-
you have to
but-
figure out
but
how to
you-
do it.
You're gonna have to
has
figure
to
out
be
a way to
virtual.
do it. Maybe they should go directly to town staff with their concerns and let town staff bring it to us.
Or to the website, or if you
Yeah,
push it
yeah,
out.
or
on
to the
communi-
website.
on the
That's true,
communication.
but with COVID, you're not gonna get them in this building.
Right, that's what I said. You can't do a
Yeah.
big meeting, of course.
No. I don't know if you could do it outside.
And they may want to do what we just did,
August.
like the interchange, and do a YouTube and post it on our website and do a presentation. That might be a good way of doing it too.
I'm just talking about a way to engage the public.
Yeah.
'Cause a lot of times when you put communication on the website,
Right.
everybody did.
Right.
Most
We
people.
didn't want to make up a process tonight, but I'm just, because we don't know what the right answer is for you all, but if there's ability to do that and we can get that done, we can get that in motion. All good ideas. So I'm glad we had this conversation.
Okay, thank you, Kelly. I'm gonna give you final word.
I just want to reiterate my thanks to everyone for this opportunity. Like the guys at KDM, Cobblestone, Lafayette Village, and Foxwood are all, very excited about this project. We're looking forward to getting going on it. And again, please want to reiterate, please reach out to me through Michael, through Kelly, with any questions, comments, or concerns. I'm here at your convenience, so just let me know.
Thank you, appreciate that.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Okay, the last item, consideration of a request by Rolesville Rural Fire Department and determination of a process and consultant. And is Amy gonna lead this or somebody else, Kelly? Amy will?
Thank y'all.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Cap, are we ready?
You're ready.
Okay.
You've been announced.
Between the delay of the actual in this room and getting over there, apologize.
You've been introduced, so
Great. Well, good evening, Mayor, members of the Town Board. Good evening. Here to give you an update on a request from the Rolesville Rural Fire Department. A few weeks ago, the town received a letter. It was a request from the Rolesville Rural Fire Department requesting that the town take on 11 employees of that fire department as town employees. And a copy of that letter was attached and included in your agenda packet. After receiving that letter, town staff went ahead and started doing some research. Reached out to several groups, the North Carolina League of Municipalities, North Carolina Fire Chief Consulting, who did some work for the rural fire department and the town last year in terms of where we might be able to site future stations. And we reached out to some other communities that have dealt with similar issues recently, including the towns of Wake Forest, Knightdale, Cornelius, and Leland. Based on the recommendations that we received from those phone calls, it was staff's recommendation that should the town pursue taking on those employees, based on the information we heard, that it would be appropriate and recommended that that action be part of a larger action to look at the long-term consolidation of the town and the fire department function. So that taking on the employees then would just be a first step to a larger process. After further consultation between the town and the fire department, both parties agreed that it would be desirable to engage the services of a contractor to come in and help work through some of these issues. So to that end, we did reach out to a few groups. We reached out to North Carolina Fire Chief Consulting, we had the previous experience with. We reached out to Brooks Innovative Solutions, who worked on the Knightdale study, and the Center for Public Safety Management, who worked on the Cornelius study. And I forgot to mention, Fire Chief Consulting also did work on the Wake Forest consolidation that just happened. So that RFP was not in when I put the agenda item together for you all, but we did get some responses back. So I can report that Brooks Innovative Solutions declined to submit a separate proposal for theirs, so we did not receive anything specific from them. The Center for it means they just chose not to submit a proposal. Oh, not that you may be something, but I will. Yeah, no, they chose not to submit. Center for Public Safety Management did submit something. It was a little bit outside of perhaps what we were looking for, but they did submit something we were able to look at. And then North Carolina Fire Chief Consulting also submitted a proposal. So based on those responses that came in, I believe they've been shared with all of you as well as with fire department staff. But based upon those responses that came in, our staff's recommendation is that the North Carolina Fire Chief Consulting, should you desire to proceed with this sort of study, that was our recommendation. And for a few reasons. First was...
Let me stop you there, though.
Sure.
We received copies of this? Did I miss it?
I think there was an email.
Yeah.
Today?
Yesterday morning.
I missed it.
That was today?
Monday,
Yes,
Monday
yesterday.
morning. Monday afternoon for me.
The staff's recommendation is North Carolina Fire Chief Consulting for several reasons. One of those would go with cost. Their proposal for the first steps here, well, maybe I should go back. Actually, let's talk about one of the reasons is a phased approach that they recommend, which it sets out 3 different phases in terms of examining this issue. First phase would be a fact-finding phase, then an analysis phase, and then finally a survey of how an implementation would happen. And one of the things that we thought was a strength of this approach is that every phase offers a new decision point on whether to proceed or not to proceed, so that it breaks the study up as more information comes in
the decision makers have the opportunity to say, yes, we want to go to the next phase, or no, this isn't the right time, and we want to terminate here.
Are they saying, in effect, that after the first phase, they could come back and say to us that it is not the right time for us to move on this project?
Either the fire department or the town
Okay,
could
good.
decide.
Okay, good, okay.
So there's sort of these check-in points
Okay.
for both boards to be able to say, okay, based on what we've heard, here's where we stand, and this is the direction we'd like to go.
That's good, okay.
So now addressing that cost portion, Fire Chief Consulting was proposing $11,700 to conduct that first phase, whereas the other submitter had $49,500. Now, granted, they didn't have phases, but in terms of cost, it looks like overall that one would probably be more costly.
But that's for the whole project.
That is for the whole project, not
We don't know
phase.
how much the whole project will cost with this one, do we?
That's right.
So it could be the same.
It could be. Yep. But if you only get to the first phase and you don't go any further, you've not committed to a larger expense.
Can they break that down for 49,000?
The Center for Public Safety?
Correct.
Yeah, I think we would have to follow up with some more details for that.
But do they do the same thing? Like you said about the other one? I don't know the names. The other one.
Center for Public Safety?
You said they were outside. Were you referring to just money or something else?
Yeah, their proposal was really more of just a fire services study. I don't know if it was a communication issue. I talked to them personally and described the situation pretty well, and they seem to understand. So I don't know if this is just a little bit outside of their scope, or perhaps they just sort of rushed through and maybe.
And I feel like we're rushing through this process of just finding vendors, because we went to 3 vendors. And when was this sent out?
The RFP went out July 13th.
July 13th. And when was it required to be back?
They had 1 week.
They had 1 week. I thought it was required to be back on the 17th.
Right, so it went out Monday, 13th Monday? Yes, Monday, and then they were responded by Friday.
So is that our normal turnaround time when we do an RFP? A week?
We don't really have a
Have a
standard.
normal?
I mean, it really depends on the situation.
But I think you have to look at, I continue to emphasize for this town that when we're doing services, when we're going out and we're getting contracts, Kelly and I have had this discussion numerous times, you've got to get people in the pool. Otherwise, I feel like we're already biased, and I'm going to just say it, towards this other one. I don't even know the name of it. Tell me again. I'm sorry. Fire chief? I don't know the name.
North Carolina Fire Chief Consultant.
Right. We were already biased towards it because Wake Forest used them. That is not the way to approach something if you're doing a feasibility study. To me, doing the service to our town, to our citizens who this board is supposed to represent, is we should push back on staff to say, we need to see 3 or 4 proposals, and we should be neutral until then, until we get the proposals. When you have one that doesn't respond, you can't count them in there. You can't count them. It's just like when you're recruiting for, say, hiring a town manager, and you don't get enough people in the pool. You go back to market to get what you need to get in the pool. And I feel like we're rushing the process out of some type of, I don't know, unforeseen pressure that's out there. And I don't think that's fair to the citizens of Rolesville. So I feel like without 3 vendors to look at and say, fairly evaluate which is the best vendor to use, we're doing a disservice to Rolesville.
How did we
And I can't
advertise?
imagine there's not more out there that does this work.
How did we advertise for this?
Well, so where we came up with the 3 that we specifically sent information to are from those other communities that we spoke to who have done this work recently. Nightdale, Cornelius. So we reached out to those that we knew of and sent them the RFP to say, would you like to participate? We also put things out on our website. We have a special web page that is opportunities for bids, services, construction projects, that sort of thing. And so it was listed there as well.
Did anybody come in late after the 17th?
I'm not aware of anyone, no.
So then it may have been a breakdown in communication, since this is within their scope of work, since they did it for another firehouse.
Based on some of what I read within their proposal, I think they may have just copied something, modified a little bit of something they'd done before.
I thought that as well when I read through some of it too. I was like,
Yeah.
missing there.
They referenced other communities.
I did notice that.
And I'm sorry to be a pain, but I'm going to be a pain tonight. The other thing is, this board has also said we'd like to get all paperwork pertaining to our Tuesday night meetings at the same time. We had a lot of problems in the past with documents being sent to us at 3:30 on Monday, at 5 o'clock on Tuesday. And to me, I add that to this list because I missed this email, so I didn't even get to see this. But to me, 2 vendors are not acceptable and 1 is out of the scope. So that's not a fair assessment to say, here's who's out here, let's look at this as a fair process. To me, that does not feel like a fair process. You're not giving people a legitimate opportunity to put the bid in. And the board didn't get a legitimate opportunity to really review it because I don't know that I'm looking for trailing documents, and I shouldn't have to look for trailing documents because we should get our documents. This date has moved. We used to get it by 12 o'clock we used to get all of our agenda items by Wednesday at 12 o'clock. We moved it to 12 o'clock on Thursday or noon Thursday. Now we're to noon Friday, but then we're getting an email on Monday and an attachment at 3:30 the day of the meeting. That's not okay. That's a little confusing. And people can miss stuff. I apologize that I'm not perfect, but I can miss stuff. So that does the board a disservice in preparing for the meeting and being ready to have the discussions. And I shared that with Kelly. I told him I was bringing that up.
How close you to finishing your
Pretty close. So other reasons that we were recommending that particular consultant did relate to the town of Wake Forest. We did speak to the staff there who had very positive reviews of the work that they had done, as well as how smoothly their transition went very recently. And then finally, the reason for recommending that group had to do with our insurer, which is through the North Carolina League of Municipalities. And in discussions with them, because they do hold our workers' compensation, our general liability insurance policies, they had recommended this particular group as one that we might want to consider, which I think is also very helpful. That it says to me that they are assured that this group understands many of the issues that they would be very concerned with as well.
Do either of those other ones work with the municipal league of?
Well, they weren't recommend. They weren't names that were given to me when I called. Basically, there's several issues for the group to discuss tonight, which are outlined at the end of this memo. So, first of all, does the board desire to proceed with a contractor to do this type of study? If so, what are the next steps? Do we go out? Do we find some more? Are you comfortable with where we are? And then there needs to be some conversation about paying for this study. There's been some different ideas floated out there, and so what would be the appropriate way, and who should pay for this type of work that's being proposed?
Touch upon the pay part. So what are some of the ideas that are floating around out there?
Well, I know it's been discussed somewhat informally between the town and the fire department that there was some willingness to share the costs. Or it may be something where the town feels that they should bear the costs since the request was made of the town. So I think either of those are good solutions, and there have reasons and rationales behind either one. So I think that would just be up to all of you in terms of what you feel the most comfortable with.
I think if the town is asking, if it's the town's burden in the end, not burden, in the end to bear.
Benefit.
I'm saying,
Town's
it's
benefit.
yes, if the town's benefits in the end, then the town should pay for it. That's my opinion. And the town is the sole point of contact for this project. And then yes, for any questions, anything, then the town is the
Another way to put
point
it,
of contact
I think
for
she's
that.
trying to say they'd be working for us.
In a nutshell.
But I would like to know, what became of that conversation that you all had with the fire department last week? Sorry. What were the results of the conversation you all had last week with the fire department?
Regarding,
I don't know, you had this small little meeting you all talked about from our previous meeting. You and Ronnie and Kelly and somebody from their board in April. I would like to hear what that conversation, how that went. Because I think it would help moving forward with some of the questions that Amy just brought up.
if I remember correctly, it was just talking about the what ifs. You know, if we don't do something, we're going to lose people. And that was, and the sense of urgency and the need, if I remember correctly, of having the study done. And that's pretty much it.
Yeah, actually, there's no action. I mean, we
You
didn't
know, I
come
mean,
out
we
for
I
action.
mean, we
I didn't
weren't
think there was any
offering-
action, but
Amy came out for Amy was there. She came out for understanding of what next steps could take.
And the next steps were to bring this to the board.
Also, there was nothing that
Oh,
would
you
help.
know, you get to vote whether you want to move forward or.
No, I'm just saying, was there anything that was said in that conversation that would help us?
No.
No?
She said everything, everything that there is to say, really. April kind of touched on some of it about, who should pay for it, who should hire it, and it's this board to decide that. I mean, we didn't decide that. Anything you got to add, April?
I'm just going to say that I understand what you said, April, in regards to who pays for it, but I don't feel that burden should fall on the town alone. I do feel the information should come back to the town since they have to make that decision, but I don't think the entire financial burden should fall on the town.
And it doesn't have to.
I thought that at first too. But then that poses the question, if the financial burden doesn't fall on the town, then can we still be the one to solely receive the information up front? Not that we wouldn't share with the fire department.
I think that we should.
Well, I think it's the same thing with our traffic studies. If we do traffic study, we know it's what we wanted and everything else, we keep control of it. If we let the developer do a traffic study, then they can come up with whatever they want compared to that. So if we're going to do the study, I feel like the town, if we're going to do it right and they're going to be a part of us, we should be in charge of getting the study ourselves.
So for the traffic study, does the developer pay for that and give the information to the town?
Yeah, right now.
At this
yeah,
time.
Right, at this time. That's what I mean. So that feels biased. They could pick whoever they want to do the study. It's going to cost X amount to move these 11 people over to our stuff, everything else. But if we're paying for the study, we're in charge of the study. We can say what we want. So I agree with what you were saying.
That's a lot of money to say who gets, I mean, if we're in a position to say, well, we want the information, but we want you to share in the cost, I don't see where that would make it a bias or a biased report.
I would
Because
just see it as
you're laying out the rules right now. Okay, listen, this is a big this is a substantial amount of money we're referring to,
Right.
and we need to know where this is going to go. So, I think everybody should have a little skin in the game on that. But being that the town is going to be the deciding factor, you can still share the information,
Right.
but the information shouldn't be going to both sides at the same time. At least let the town see it, understand it, have a sit-down conversation with the fire department.
Well, that's the proposal in the conversation there, is to do a dual agency type thing if we're gonna split the cost.
I'm sorry, what? Say it
In the
again?
conversation that's presented in this memo, is that correct?
Yeah, it's going to be shared, regardless of who pays for it. Both entities are going to get it, right, Sheila?
Right, so if that's
Oh,
the
that's
case.
that's not what I'm saying. Amy, what does the memo say about the shared cost?
So what it does talk about, that if you share the cost, it does create a little bit of an issue with the contractor in terms of that they would have two clients. And so we would just have to be very clear with that contractor and make sure the contractor's comfortable, understanding that they report to two clients and they would share everything equally. And
So the issue with that, you understand it from a real estate perspective,
Right.
dual agency. So if we're the acquirer of this that's considering this, so Paul's saying it's going to be biased if you have two clients. They're going to be working for both clients. That's very hard to manage. You know that from a real estate
Right, and I know
perspective.
that, but I'm just saying, when it comes down to money, this was brought to the town.
Right.
Right, the town didn't bring it to the fire department. So I just think right there, the financial liability shouldn't just fall on the
I
town.
got you.
Well, I think as long as there's an understanding that all the
Exactly.
information is coming to the town.
Exactly,
and the town
first.
Is the, yes, and
Right.
give the town time to digest and do what we need to do. I think if that understanding is met, then
How do you
yeah.
do that first with dual agency, guys? How do you do that first? Can you do that in real estate? No. If it's dual agency, you've got an accountability to both clients, right? I don't know how you can say, I'm the first one and you get it after we get it. I don't think you can do that, right?
No, you can't.
Yeah.
Sheila's right.
No, and I get the dual agency with real estate, but even though we're not talking about real estate, I know the concept is still the same, but I just think you're gonna have this, I think it's gonna get away from us, but maybe it won't.
I just feel like if we're going to try to figure out if it's in the best interest, it ultimately has to be the best interest for the town. So whether we take them on or not, we need to make the decision. So I feel like we should be in charge. We would be in charge of whoever does that study for us. I feel like, it's just like if we were to take anything else over, anybody could have a study that says it's a great thing for the town to take this over.
Right.
But at the same time, that might not be a great idea 10 years down the road when we're $1 million in debt because of that decision. So I feel like we should.
And I agree with Paul and Sheila that we need to foot the bill, not the fire department.
I'm just talking about span of control. If you're gonna say, hey, we get the information first, but we want you to pay for half of it, I don't think that's gonna fly. It wouldn't fly for me if you told me that.
If they could come to that agreement, which I don't know if they would.
That's what I'm saying, basically,
Right.
I get
In a perfect world.
the chain of where the information is going, I understand that part, but I'm just saying, this is, I guess.
I'd like to also speak to Sheila's concern about us. I know there's been frustration that people will not bid on this because there are not that many people out there. I don't have a problem with putting it off 2 more weeks. But if we don't get anybody else in 2 more weeks, we need to move on the town's recommendations. I was hoping we'd have a decision tonight, but we can't please everybody, and I'd like your opinions on that.
I think we need an apples to apples comparison. I mean, at least.
So, Amy, do you feel like it'd be any difference 2 weeks than it is tonight? I mean, you've been digging a little bit trying to find people.
well, I think you're still going to run into, I don't have my calendar handy, you're still going to run into, it's not going to be quite 2 weeks because we do have the agendas prepared, almost a week before the meeting. So I don't think we're in a 5-week span right now. Yeah, it'll be 2 weeks. So you're really, if you're waiting until the meeting 2 weeks from now, it's really only 1 more week of advertising and soliciting, which kind of puts us in the same spot we are of having people have to submit something within 5 to 7 days.
Kelly, have you got an opinion on this?
So we're trying to meet a timeline, and that was the reason why this moved along. And from the discussions we've had informally, there was a desire to seek more input. We ran out to 2 other entities that we know of. We've asked if there are others. I think there may be a couple more national ones. Don't know that for certain. Not certain where to put these out. We've been told it's a very highly specialized study group. So I don't know if we will get anything further. Amy's right. We would not, if we're going to try and meet a appropriate timeline, it'd be at least another 3 weeks we'd run with it, see what we could get, see if we could clarify. CPSM, they definitely cut and paste previous proposal. But there might be another group or two that might, I don't know.
Can you tell me the timeline we're working with? Because I'm unfamiliar with that timeline.
The timeline was based upon urgency expressed previously in this board meeting that we should be addressing this.
So what was the timeline that was established?
There
I
never-
understand
there
that there
never
was
was one.
urgency expressed. There was no timeline to my knowledge.
Informally, we were informally given, try and bring something tonight.
All right, so I want to say something to
got a lot of
the
meetings
fact
going
as to why I say the fire department should pay it. Not that anybody's a good guy or a bad guy, but because of that urgency of getting this done, that burden that's put on the town, that's why I said, well, if there's such an urgency, then let the fire department pay for it. I get it, this is not real estate, but I do understand dual agency. But I'm saying that urgency that was expressed to me, even like right now, 2 weeks, that's still urgent. And like you said, it's going to be a little unrealistic to expect more in 2 weeks. So if you're saying that you want, that you all feel that the town should pay for it, I get it. But take that urgency off the table. I understand there is an immediate need to take care of this. But by keep putting those constraints on the town and then say the town pays for it, I just don't see that as being fair to the town. So if we take the urgency of, okay, 2 more weeks, take that off the table to give time for Amy or whoever's sending it out to send it out and make those requests, then let's do that. But get the 2 weeks off the table because we're pushing it again. The town's going to participate in paying for it, that's fine. But that 2 weeks, the timetables, it's just a little too rushed for me. But it needs to be done. I understand the importance.
And I do, but we had a conversation, and at one time, Kelly was misinformed that no one was recruiting our firefighters. We found out from the board chairman, Spence Jones, that they were. Since then, we have been told that Nightdale is in the process of hiring 6 to 8 new firefighters. They're going to look for experienced firefighters. You know where they're coming.
So this was the timeline that apparently was not apparent to the full board. Is
No,
this-
if it's a timeline, it's in my mind.
Okay,
All
'cause
right,
I'm
all right.
not familiar. Well,
Okay.
Kelly referred to it too. I was just
Okay.
clarifying if I missed something.
Kelly, if I misspoke, you can correct me on that.
But let me ask this question. So, but it's also been said that if our firefighters do go, we don't want anybody to go anywhere.
Right.
But if they were to go, then there is a clause or something in a contract with Wake County where they would provide us with firefighters. Not that we want ours to go anywhere because these are a part of the firefighter family. But I'm just saying we would still be covered, but prayerfully they're not leaving Rolesville. But and if this does take another 2 weeks, in the big scheme of things, this whole process is going to take a year plus. So is 2 weeks going to really make a big difference in order to make sure that we're getting the right consultant in here to do the job? Is 2 weeks added on top of 12 to 18 months that big of a deal when you look at it as the big picture?
That's my point exactly. I agree with you. Is it going to make a difference? I mean, I know there's a need. I definitely understand that. And like April said, we don't want to lose any of the firefighters. But at the same time, we can't be rushed and so haste in our decisions that we're like, okay, we'll pay for everything. Okay, we'll share the information. Okay, we can get it done in 2 weeks. That's just not, to me, being responsible. We need to slow it down a little bit, but still stay on task and get it done. Don't delay it, get it done, but don't seem a little panic-stricken.
The ball is rolling.
Yeah, so keep it moving.
Okay. I think I'll move on here. So Amy, you heard the discussion, I think. So how much time do you need, you feel like, that would satisfy the board here?
I think if you're going to be able to give other vendors an opportunity, you have to give them more than a week. So that would put us not at our next meeting, but perhaps the meeting a month from now, which would be the second meeting in August.
18.
And that might be appropriate as well, because we're trying to get back to the regular session and the work session. And so that might be appropriate for that reason as well.
Okay. So, so you feel like that's appropriate for your needs?
I'm just saying, go to market, be fair. Get, like Paul said, get the apples so that you can compare them. If you don't have the apples, you really don't have we've done it on other things. Branding, we did it. We came out with a great guy that did some work for us. But if we don't give it that due diligence, I think we're shooting ourselves in the foot from the gates. And they may be the best. Just prove it.
And we're not, am I correct, that we're not even going to discuss whether we could bring these 11 in until we have our study, total study done?
How can we? How can we
get to that?
Okay.
The whole thing is the feasibility of doing that, right?
Okay.
Let me tell you, Jackie, on a personal level, I don't want to see not one of those firefighters leave. But at the same time, I want to make sure we do it right.
And I agree, but you bring in outside firefighters that are not familiar with this area, that may not be as well trained as ours are, and we'll have some.
It's a risk.
It's going to affect response times, and citizens could die.
Yeah, I think
I know there's a shortage of firefighters in the county. I don't know where I got that information from, but I understand
what I'm
there
hearing,
is.
though, I think the board has set expectation. So,
I know.
I know. We all agree on it. It's expectation that let's give Amy time enough to get the right amount of vendors. And you saying the first meeting in September? Is that what you said? Or
August 18th.
August
18th.
Second meeting in August?
Less than a month.
Don't say September. You're going to give Jackie a heart attack over there. Then we have to call firefighters in.
Everybody good with that? We don't need a vote. We just need to give the staff a direction there.
Last question. What do you want to make the decision of the consultant, and do you want to see full packages as part of that meeting also? Or do you want staff's recommendation, or how would you like to?
I want staff's recommendation based off of what you get.
With the proposals included?
Yes, with the proposals.
Like you did this time, but can I get it on Thursday by noon?
Yep. Well, with a reasonable deadline, we can do that. Yes.
That would be great.
Everybody agree? All right. I see nods.
Right, Jay. Trying to do the right thing.
Okay. Anything else, Amy?
That's it.
All right. We'll kind of hold this one. Now this one was supposed to be consideration. So hopefully the next one will have enough information that we can frame it as a decision. Because I think we do need to, not
The next step.
keep kicking it down the road. And
Yeah.
I agree.
Take the next step, for sure.
A good another 4 weeks wouldn't make that much difference in the long scheme of things. But let's let the next item on the agenda next time be a decision on this.
Agreed.
Everybody agree to that?
I agree.
Not consideration, but a decision. Okay, thanks. Appreciate it. Thank you, Amy. All right, that really brings us to the end of the agenda. We don't really have any reports, anything to do tonight. Is there anything urgent anybody want to bring up before we adjourn? Ask for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
No. I just have a quick question to Kelly. What month are we in? July. It's probably a little soon, but is there anything that you know about in regards to the state fair and the October Fest fair that we do here? What is that called? Fall Fest. Any word on the direction of that?
I do not know about the state fair, the Oktoberfest.
I'm sorry, I'm thinking of New York when we do
Fall
October
Fest.
Fall Fest. Thank you. It's still scheduled. We're still monitoring that. We're accepting vendor applications.
Okay. All right, that's all I want to know. All right, thank you.
I do want to just add one thing. We met with the chamber, obviously you all know, on Thursday. The public knows as well. And I think Michael is collecting questions to send. So if you all have questions, please send them to Michael. I told him I'd get them to him tomorrow.
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing that up because, one of the things we can consider if we want to have another Zoom meeting like we did last time where we can ask questions personally, but are you guys okay with the way Michael was doing it? Everybody's okay with that?
Yeah, I just want it all in one group, and I want to go all back out to the group with answers.
Okay.
That way, everybody's on the same page and everything. We're not having phone calls and this and that. Everything's in everybody's hands.
Okay.
Zoom was a little challenging. I think Zoom is great if you have like 10 people or less.
Yeah.
But once you get broader, it gets tough.
Yeah. Great. Okay, good. Anybody got anything else? Just before I ask for adjournment, I know we're going through some mighty, I won't say tough things, but it's challenging things right now in some of the decisions we have to make, with the Cornerstone and the fire department acquisition, I guess you could call it that, and then many other things. So I appreciate the board, tentative and working together and getting through these issues. And I think tonight kind of demonstrated that. We come up with a plan everybody agreed to, and we're going to be able to move on. So thank you, board. Appreciate that. And I will entertain a motion now.
So moved to
I second.
adjourn.
Second.
I heard a second from Michelle. Any other discussion?
Y'all coming back Friday. Don't forget, 8 a.m.
Okay, so listen, let me
You
just
bringing
say
coffee
now,
and donuts?
Sheila's got the donuts.
Gotta bring my
right?
own.
Sheila gets the donut.
Sheila gets the donuts.
They are on sale at Krispy Kreme, but it goes off
No,
Thursday. Y'all
not
want
the-
stale donuts?
Not the Krispy Kremes, the ones you bought last time. I didn't have them, but they look
Oh,
delicious.
that's too far away.
They had the bacon on them. I don't know what they were. But listen, I just want to say again that this coming Friday, I am going to be a little tardy because I have the AC guy coming to my space. And I thought I could sit there while he was working. So I just need to let him in, and then I'll run down the back and I'll be here.
Okay, that'd be good. And I think we narrowed it down to one item on the agenda. Is that right?
Okay.
So we're going to be concentrating on the matter we need to kind of all agree on. That's going to be a tough one. So, but we'll work through it like we did in everything else. So appreciate everybody. Good job. And I had a motion and a second from Michelle. No more discussion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right. Thank you. Appreciate it.
And will planning be here Friday?